Let me call this meeting to order, or convention to order. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Co-Chair of the Commission. And with me is Mayor Muriel Bowser, who is also Co-Chair of the Commission, and Senator Paul Strauss, Senator Michael Brown, and Representative Franklin Garcia. Let me begin by saying good evening to all of you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. This is the second of 3 days of this convention, and we're going to begin this day or this evening the same as we began Monday night, and that is we will have the presentation of colors, followed by the national anthem to be sung by Lauren Kayla Holland, who I understand is a student at Wilson, and then we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we could have the presentation of colors, please.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank the Honor Guard, and again, I want to thank all of you for attending this evening. We will proceed with brief opening statements from each of the commissioners here. Mayor Bowser, do you have anything you want to say?
Will reserve my time, Chairman.
All right, Senator Strauss?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just pledged allegiance to a flag that has no star on it for us, one nation, indivisible, and yet we sit separate without the rights of our fellow citizens. It's an honor to be here today with such a distinguished group of citizens and such a distinguished panel. We gather today in this high school auditorium in a city with many fine buildings made of marble that symbolize democracy and freedom, and yet I can't think of a more appropriate room for us to be, because high school auditoriums like this are around any part of our country, except the kids that go to this high school have to do so knowing that they live in a city, in a community that doesn't enjoy the same rights as high school students who sit in auditoriums just like this around the country. I can't think of a more appropriate location to give us the seriousness of our purpose to bring about the change that we need and give us the equality that we deserve. And I was proud to pledge allegiance to that flag, even though it doesn't have a star for us yet, because it's time that we add that star. But I'm also saddened to note that that flag now sits at half-mast once again. Some would say because of policies that we in the District of Columbia can't adequately debate when the United States Senate that I was elected to represent my fellow citizens to convenes. So I'm glad to be here tonight. We have a lot of work to do, but we gather for an important purpose. And I want to thank all of the delegates who've come out tonight. As one of our speakers tonight is fond of saying, the most important title in a democracy isn't senator or mayor or chairman, it's citizen. And as American citizens, we're here to claim the rights that we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Strauss. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief because tonight really is about getting input from you. But let me follow up on what Senator Strauss said. That lovely rendition we just heard from that young lady from Wilson High School, that was a song written by a Washingtonian, Francis Scott Key, who was on a mission for the DC National Guard when he was captured in Baltimore, and wrote a poem that later became our national anthem. We have been part of America since America began. Today, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed the 2017 budget with a rider on it to block the referendum for budget autonomy that was passed overwhelmingly by the citizens of the District of Columbia. Statehood is the only remedy for us. It's only statehood that makes us whole, and statehood that makes us equal. So now is the time for us to get rid of this political anachronism, which has been the albatross around our neck for more than 200 years. We have a real opportunity here. We've heard, we're 2 months into this process, we've heard from many people that the process is not perfect, and that they have problems with some of the provisions of the Constitution. I agree, the process is not perfect, but let's not kill the good in search of the perfect. We need to get this done. We need to get it on the ballot. We need to make our demand to Congress, and we need to become the 51st state. This is the time to do it. We have a president that says, I'm for it. We have 2 major political candidates who have shown their support. And Bernie Sanders is a co-sponsor of the New Columbia Statehood Act, and my candidate, Hillary Clinton, has said she'll fight for it if she gets elected. So this is our time. Let's keep our eye on that, and let's make sure we keep moving on this process and we get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Chairman. On Tuesday, you all went and voted. We had a great celebration of democracy, and so I want to thank you all for coming out and vote. And someday I hope that I can actually return the favor that you did by voting for me and go out into the House of Representatives and vote on your behalf. And so I also want to, last time we paid a moment of silence to the people of Orlando. And as we see the difficult task of burying the people now, we continue to have our thoughts and prayers with the victims and the families of those people. I want to also thank all those first congratulate the people that got elected, and congratulate some of those people, for the activists. I see Cage and Keith and some of these other folks that were very active in this process. And also thank Anise for helping us put all those signs throughout the city so that both people can come out. I've never come out here to this auditorium, and I didn't realize it was this big. And so hopefully tomorrow, I attended a graduation yesterday, and the principal of the school committed to bringing some of those students here tomorrow. So hopefully tomorrow we'll have a much larger crowd. But thank you so much. Just very excited to be here.
Thank you, Representative Garcia. And I neglected to thank the Wilson Jazz Band, which was excellent. So, they might actually be better than us up here, but we'll see. We have an agenda, and I'm following the agenda, and there were copies of the agenda that should be available for everybody. In a moment, I'll recognize our parliamentarian to explain the rules of engagement, and that'll be followed by a panel discussion with 5 individuals, then Omarosa Menegalt, followed by an opportunity for citizen testimony and discussion, which is important for all of us. So there'll be a lot of, there should be a lot of time for that before we conclude. And I want to remind everybody that we will reconvene tomorrow morning in this same space. So let me now recognize our parliamentarian, John Valkyr, who I believe is going to explain the rules of engagement.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, members of the New Columbia Statehood Commission, and fellow delegates. My name is John Valkyr. I'm a partner at the law firm of Aaron Fox, where I chair our pro bono committee. I'm also the former chief counsel to Congresswoman Norton, and most importantly, the proud parent of a Wilson tiger. It is my honor and privilege to serve on the mayor's DC Statehood Legal Advisory Team and to act as your parliamentarian this evening. The legal advisory team has been made up of law professors, public interest lawyers, government lawyers from the offices of the mayor, the council, the attorney general, as well as lawyers from the private sector. Our charge has been to advise the commission with respect to crafting a draft, and let me repeat, draft constitution for DC residents to review and to propose amendments. Our work has been governed by the following guiding principles. First, to promote stability by maintaining the district's basic governing structure. Second, to build on the statehood efforts in the 80s, but simplify and modernize the constitutions developed then. 3, to establish structures needed for good government. 4, to empower the legislature and executive to govern in the interests of the people who elect them. 5, to produce orderly and responsible governance. 6, to reflect the values of DC residents. And finally, to demonstrate that the district merits congressional admission as a state. So, building on these principles, the Commission adopted the following process for approval of this Constitution. On May 6th, the Commission released the draft Constitution and widely disseminated it, including online and in every public library in the District of Columbia. The Commission has solicited input from district residents in town hall meetings and public hearings throughout the city, through comments posted directly to the Commission's website, through various committees set up by the Commission, and through direct contact by DC residents, and of course, through the convention that we're participating in right now. And the Commission heard testimony in the first night of the convention on Monday in historic Anacostia, and we'll hear more testimony, of course, tonight during this evening's session and at tomorrow's concluding session. Thus far, the Commission has received close to 300 comments, all of which are published on the Commission's website for the public to review. The Commission will consider amendments to the draft Constitution in a public meeting at a date to be noticed shortly. The Commission will then vote to approve the Constitution and submit it to the Council by June 30th. The Council will then consider and approve a referendum resolution, which will be sent to the Board of Elections no later than July the 8th. The Board of Elections will then approve the resolution and put it before all of us voters on Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th. And that resolution will ask voters to approve 4 elements required for admission to the Union and in conjunction with the so-called Tennessee Plan. First, we will approve the will of the residents of the District of Columbia to support statehood. Second, the approval of the amended Constitution. 3, approval of the boundaries of the new state. And 4, our desire to embrace a representative, small d, democratic form of government. Once the voters approve this resolution, the mayor and council will prepare the final package for admission to be submitted to the new president and the new Congress after they take office in January. Okay, so that's the process. Let me very quickly run through the rules of engagement for this evening. This convention is nonpartisan, and attendees must respect all views. Decorum will be upheld at all times. The commissioners of the new Columbia Statehood Commission will chair all sessions. Each session has a topic assigned and will encourage discussion related to that topic. Tonight, we will be looking at Article 2, the executive branch, Article 4, budget and financial management, and Article 5, borrowing. These are the topics tonight, but comments are welcome on other topics as well. Perhaps most importantly, all DC residents are deemed to be delegates. You all have your badges. You all have the right to participate this evening. Testimony will follow the rules established in the public engagement process approved by the Statehood Commission and will generally follow the way the council receives testimony: 3 minutes for individuals to testify and 5 minutes for organizations. An individual can only testify once per session. This will allow as many folks to testify as possible. And also importantly, all comments will be given equal weight for review by the Commission, no matter what medium you choose. So for example, online testimony will be given the same weight as testimony received here tonight. The ultimate decision on all amendments and comments will be that of the new Columbia Statehood Commission by a majority vote. And again, final approval of the Constitution will be up to all of us on the November 8th ballot. So these are the rules of engagement. That was the process, and I hope you all have a productive and exciting convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Valkyr. So again, tonight is when we get to public comment, the focus is on Article 2, the executive branch, Article 4, budget and financial management, and Article 5, borrowing. The commission is comprised of 5 members. The 5 of us who are sitting here are the 2 senators, the representative, the mayor, and I are co-chairs of the commission. We will now, we're now going to turn to the panel discussion. Let me just say before we all get up, because the panel will be here, we have this panel to discuss the political implications of our statehood effort. As you know, the work of this convention will have ramifications not only here in the District of Columbia, but also in the Congress, with the new president and across the country. To kick things off, we will have as our panel moderator a person who's no stranger to the political conversation. So in a moment, welcome please the moderator of Meet the Press, the host of Meet the Press Daily on MSNBC, and the political director of NBC News, Mr. Chuck Todd.
All right, I will quickly introduce the panel, 2 of which they weren't supposed to leave yet, but that's all right. You can come back. Chairman Mendelson, of course, Mayor Bowser, both are going to be on this panel. I don't think they need any introduction here, but also joining us in this conversation is George Bradenberg, a former executive vice president with AOL Time Warner, member of the Board Economic Club of Washington, D.C., and a longtime Republican as well, and Jamie Raskin, of course, a Maryland state senator, and now the Democratic nominee for Congress right across the border over here in Maryland. So come on up.
That new Congress.
I'm just going to, I'll go ahead and stand for this, yes. And I want to try to organize the conversation a little bit and sort of try to do this in a couple of ways, in ways that maybe the arguments against and for on this. But Mayor Bowser, let me start with you. You've got a specific way you want to do this. You want to try to do this in a way that, I guess, avoids a national constitutional amendment process. Explain.
Well, first, Chuck, we want to thank you for paying attention to local Washington, D.C. And I just did Chuck's show, Meet the Press Daily, and already people from around the country are calling their friends in D.C., talking about statehood for Washington,
I got more
D.C.
feedback on it than I expected. I'll be
Yes,
honest.
because
it was a pleasant surprise.
well, you can keep doing it.
There you go.
And you can get even more comments and see, and that is what we have found in the last several weeks, that the attention on statehood is gaining momentum. And what we know is that this is a conversation that we can't just have at Wilson High School, we can't just have in Washington, D.C., but we have to touch all 50 states. So our Congresswoman for many, many years has been submitting a piece of legislation to get D.C. statehood. The idea that we have to change the Constitution to get D.C. statehood is not right. States can be admitted by a simple vote of the Congress. And the piece of legislation that she has circulated is still there and active. We wanted to be on the offensive, however, and we wanted to put the district in the position, if the political winds go the way that we like, and we already know that the new Congress is going to have Jamie Raskin already. That's an improvement. That's an improvement already. And so we have the opportunity to have a new president and a new Congress. And this time, if things work out, and it may not this time, but maybe it's the next time, but we will have pulled together a contemporary conversation about statehood, the boundaries, the Constitution, and a new vote. And that's the way we're going to proceed.
Chairman Mendelson, I don't want to assume that this can't be done, but let me ask you this. Do you think this effort, this renewed effort, is a way to at least maybe, at a minimum, it'll force Republicans in Congress to support budget autonomy?
I certainly hope so. I mean, we have to keep pressing this effort. That's the bottom line, is we just have to keep pressing it, and we could sit back and do nothing and wait for, I don't know what the opportune wins are, and I don't even know what the opportune wins look like. I do think that what we have in the near future is we know we're going to have a new Congress, and we're going to have a new president. And we really ought to seize this opportunity now to press forward rather than waiting any longer. Surely there are going to be some challenges. What's going on with budget autonomy I find really discouraging, in the sense that there's no good reason why why the Republicans in Congress would be trying to repeal what we adopted lawfully with regard to budget autonomy. And I emphasize good. There's no good reason. There may be a reason. I think it's kind of mean.
What is the reason? I mean, look, I've heard Chairman Meadows' argument on this, but it does seem as if you've taken a step back. With your previous chairman have been a little more open, Republican Chairman Issa and Chairman Davis.
Correct. There's a long history of Republicans who've supported budget autonomy, including the preceding committee chair, Republican committee chair.
What's Mark Meadows' case?
Part of the reason that they give is that somehow this is unconstitutional. And if budget autonomy is unconstitutional, that is, that the district would have the legislative authority to adopt its budget, then the Home Rule Act is unconstitutional. But they don't make that argument, and they can't make that argument, because over 2 centuries, Congress has delegated one form of government or another to the district. It's mean-spirited what they're doing, because we have shown that we can actually run the city well. And Congress has shown over the last 20 years that increasingly they have no interest in running the city. There's no longer a district committee to go to if we want to talk about our budget. They haven't passed our budget on time, I think, since 1994. On time, that's before the fiscal year. They haven't changed a single cent in the last 10 years since the control board went away. When you look at issues that other jurisdictions are struggling with, such as the pension, We are the best in the country, in terms of our retirement being fully funded and the other post-employment benefits, which is another post-retirement fund, being fully funded. No other jurisdiction is fully funded with both of those. We have surpluses year after year. We've built up our reserves. We are running a very healthy, financially well-run city. We just are. And, but we know that it costs us money to not have budget autonomy. It just costs us money. It depresses our credit slightly on Wall Street, so we pay more when we borrow. And the delays in the budget mean we have to borrow money. There's just a whole host of disadvantages to the current process. And Congress should be recognizing they always have plenary authority. They can step aside. It should step aside because they really have left the field and let us run things. And if they don't like something, not that I want to invite this, but they always have plenary authority.
George, you're here to help make the argument to your fellow Republicans why they shouldn't be afraid of DC statehood. So what's the argument?
Well, I think the first argument is it's the right thing to do. I mean, you start with the proposition. Look, I am a proponent of a very strong national defense. We have kids from the District of Columbia going to fight for the right to vote of people in Baghdad. And they now have a right to vote, and we don't. Now, what kind of irony is that? So, I mean, you think from a Republican point of view, after all, we are the party of Lincoln. We did participate in the voting rights amendments of, or the Voting Rights Act of '65. So we do have a history of supporting the right thing. This is sort of unfinished business, I think, on the voting rights.
You know, the big argument, of course, is, it's two Democratic senators, so that...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the question is, okay, for me, a DC Republican, I think it's essential that we develop a competitive DC Republican Party. And I think that with a competitive DC Republican Party, through time, that in fact, you would in fact find Republican support. This is a long game, not a short game. Right now, if there were 2 senators in this district, there'd be 2 more Democratic senators. But in order to build a strong Republican Party, if we give career opportunities to public service for Republicans in this district to get both offices either at the city level or the state level or at the federal level, there are greater opportunities, I believe, for Republicans. And in fact, the issue palette with which we'll deal will be national defense issues, will be all the taxation issues, all the issues that I think we all share, but we only have one voice. That's the Democratic voice. So we need a DC Republican Party of strength and it's competitive. But this is a long game. This is not a short game.
Jamie, you're vying to represent Maryland's 8th District in Congress. There is one of the alternative ideas that gets thrown out when people talk about the district's lack of voting rights is retrocession to either Maryland or Virginia. Why is that not a good idea?
First, let me say thank you to Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, and the Commission for inviting me to be part of these proceedings, and delighted to be with you. That's my kind of Republican right there. Let's start with this. That's a question for the will of the people who live in the District of Columbia. To go back to how Mayor Bowser started, we should understand there's nothing remotely unusual about the process that the New Columbia petition is taking. The only way that any state has ever been admitted to the Union is by congressional passage of statehood legislation. There have been 37 states admitted since the original 13. All of them came in by a direct congressional enactment under Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, which gives Congress the exclusive power to admit states. And if there's any further doubt about it, under the vaunted District Clause, which usually comes to haunt the people of the District of Columbia, that gives Congress the power under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, to govern exclusively the district that becomes the seat of government. So there's a double power there that Congress has to admit a new state. Now, you're right that the portions of the District of Columbia that were retroceded to Virginia, Alexandria and Arlington in 1846, that was also done by congressional enactment. And that's another possibility. That's a so-called political question. It's a political question for the people of the District of Columbia and the people of Maryland, if that's, another way that people want to go. It's not a crazy suggestion, I think, but I don't know that there are any examples of people who are part of a land rejoining a state they used to be part of. Usually people create a new state. Well, I guess Virginia is the example, from Alexandria and Arlington. The district, if it were to come back to Maryland, would continue to have the mayor and the council and the local home rule government like Baltimore, but it seems like that's not what the people have been asking for. The people have been asking for admission as a state, and there are lots of states that have been admitted that used to be part of other states. I mean, Vermont used to be part of New York, Maine used to be part of Massachusetts, West Virginia used to be part of Virginia, Tennessee used to be part of Virginia. A lot of states used to be part of Virginia. That's a political question in the strictest sense. There are different ways to get to statehood, and that's up to the people to decide. And let me just say, I think I was invited by the mayor because I'm a professor of constitutional law. I've taken real interest in the subject of equal voting rights and democracy, but I'm also here as a Marylander and a political person, and where people are fighting for equal democratic rights, I want to be on their side.
Mayor Bowser?
Yeah.
I've seen many a Democratic presidential candidate, for whatever the 2 days are appropriate to say it, will say they're for DC statehood. And they make that great proclamation that day, and the Washington Post covers it in local politics, and then it disappears. Do you believe that Hillary Clinton is different this time, that her support for it is going to be that she's going to work for it?
Well, yes, I do. And I think that the Secretary gave a full-throated endorsement for DC statehood. She didn't try to parse words like some do and talk about voting rights or you should get a vote. She said that she would support statehood. And Secretary Clinton knows DC. She's been here. And when they were here, they were when she and President Clinton were in the White House, they were supportive in a lot of ways of local Washington. And so I do think that she is going to be supportive. She also mentioned, and she recognizes, that it's not enough to just say it, that it's going to take active and vocal participation to get it done. And so I feel very strongly that the Secretary will be there and be supportive. One other thing that we did, and we're going to stay focused on this too, because we have to be vigilant around these issues. Some of us went a couple of weeks ago to the DNC's platform committee's first meeting, where I gave a statement about statehood. Statehood has not been in the Democratic platform for the last 2 cycles, and that we have to change.
How did that happen?
I don't know.
So the last 2 cycles, that platform committee was controlled by Barack Obama.
It didn't happen, and we're not happy about it. And so this is why we have made it we want to call to everybody's attention, we want to hold everybody accountable. The candidate, all of us, our congressional delegation, that we have to be vigilant about keeping it in the platform. And I say that because the candidate now has the control of the DNC, and we had a member of the platform committee come, and she wasn't as clear as the secretary was. And so for all of us, we're going to reach out to the members of the platform committee and representatives of both candidates. Senator Sanders, who has been supportive, as has been mentioned, has a lot of members on that platform committee. And we also want to reach out to them so that they're very clear that voting representation is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is statehood.
So George, Donald Trump, the first time I think I asked him about statehood, he seemed open to it, and he sort of semi-joked, well, we'll see how much, if they love my hotel, then great, So maybe you can use the post office as leverage with him.
Wish we could.
But can he be persuaded for statehood? He seems non-committal, which is better than other Republicans in the past.
Well, let's see how much Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell get under his skin. He may try and punish them.
Yeah.
He is a disruptor, he's unpredictable, and I think the answer is we don't know. We really don't know. There's quite a few things that we don't know about where he's going.
We're all learning that every day.
But he is a disruptive force, and if in fact he really wants to get under the Republican in Congress's skin, this might be just that kind of thing that would just blow their minds apart, that he would support 2 Democratic senators and another voting Democratic House member. But I would tell you that I don't know this is a matter of persuasion. This is not a matter of rationale. To some extent, it may be an argument about the right thing, but I do think that it's more likely that it's going to come about as a reaction, an emotional reaction to something that the Republicans in Congress do.
I'm curious, and Jamie, you dropped your constitutional law credentials here. So let me ask you this. Could there be a court-ordered remedy here? I mean, you could make a case that you know, there's the rights of American citizens are being taken away, and constitutional rights. And is there a way in?
Well, this has occurred to me before, and I wrote a law review article about this a long time ago, saying that it violated equal protection, one person, one vote. But you know, the answer that we got in the Alexander versus Daley litigation, or Adams versus Clinton was the companion case, and it was a 2-to-1 decision written by Judge Merrick Garland, actually. But the decision basically said it may not be fair, it may not be democratic, but the denial of representation in Congress is constitutional because Article 1 calls only for representation of the people of the states, and the people who live in the district are not part of a state. And to which, you know, what we argued was that, first of all, the district used to be part of a state. The people who live in the District of Columbia are part of land that was here when the country was founded, were part of we the people when the Constitution was written. And Congress has the power to treat the district as though it were a state. In fact, if you read through federal statutes, the district is treated explicitly as though it were a state for hundreds of purposes, including Social Security, military conscription under selective service, and so on and so forth. But the majority in that decision found that the language of Article 1 should be read strictly, and of the 17th Amendment providing for direct election of U.S. senators by the people of the state should be read strictly to allow only people who belong to states proper, that is, states that have been admitted to the Union. So the people of the district are left outside of the state-based constitutional compact like people who live in the territories. The territories have always been treated like states in waiting, and the district is something kind of outside of either of those structures. And the problem politically, of course, is that states have been admitted like animals boarding Noah's Ark in twos, in pairs, you know, Hawaii and Alaska, Kansas, Nebraska, and the famous Kansas-Nebraska Act, and so on. And the district, or the people live here don't necessarily have a partner right now.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico could be a partner.
It's always been thrown out there as the partner.
Well, I mean, I think it does come back to the Republican Party. I don't want to be too partisan about it, but you know, to invoke our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, you know, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, for the people. I think that that Lincoln would be upset about the situation. You know, I'm reading Sidney Blumenthal's new biography of Lincoln, which is great. I recommend highly to everybody. It's called A Political Life, but he focuses a lot on the fact that Lincoln really cut his teeth in the political battles before the Civil War, fighting over abolition of the slave traffic in the District of Columbia, as did John Quincy Adams. Lincoln felt very strongly about that. There was, you know, the whole country was divided over whether there should be slavery in the district. The slave states had basically been able to impose a gag rule such you couldn't even talk about slavery within the southern states. The idea was, well, that's not a federal issue, it's a state issue, but that's why the slave traffic in D.C. became such a hot topic, and the abolitionists were pushing hard for change within D.C. So the whole country was talking about the District of Columbia and the status of people who lived in the district then. And Lincoln championed the idea of freedom, that this should be a capital that stands for freedom and democracy. And I imagine he would be saying the exact same thing today.
Chairman Mendelson, what's the best argument outside of because of the constitutional aspect of this? What's the best argument against statehood that you've heard? You ever heard one?
Against statehood?
Yeah. Because you got to know the arguments against, right? If you want to make them. What's one that you felt like, well, that's a fair point. Outside of, to me, the Constitution is the biggest hurdle. But what would you say when you've heard cases against it?
I'm not sure I can say what I think is the best argument. I've heard arguments like that, the district runs on federal money, which is incorrect. Our budget is, it's 76%. I'm trying to remember, I just looked at the numbers earlier today. Local revenues, and then we get federal formula payments that everybody else gets, like Medicaid. So there's nothing unique to the district. The unique payments we get, the so-called federal payment, is 2% of our budget. Excuse me, 0.2% of our budget. It's really small. So that's not a good argument. We're too Democrat. Actually, there were, Mark Plotkin used to quote this somewhere, he's around here, the 3 twos, two black, 2 liberal, 2 Democrat. 2 urban. All right, 4 twos. I thought it was 3 twos. Thank you. But I don't think there's no principle behind that argument.
Well, those are political arguments. That's what I mean. You don't,
Correct.
right? Yeah, the political arguments are not necessarily good arguments. They're just.
One could argue that we're geographically too small, but what does that have to do with the fact that we're entitled to the same rights and responsibilities as the citizens of the United States, which are the citizens of the states, which is what we don't have and what we're arguing about here. And we only get that with statehood.
George, what would you say is going to be the toughest hurdle to convince?
Well, totally, it's political.
It is all political. None of it, you feel like there's no good
No, I
constitutional
think
argument.
Jamie's made a pretty strong argument for the constitutional. That is at least a close issue, if not one that leans in our favor. There's something odd about having a state and a state militia and a National Guard here in the district when in fact your federal government is here. And at one point, I am sure there was a concern that if you gave state power, or that kind of power, to the District of Columbia, somehow they could take over the White House and you couldn't.
The National Guard of D.C., they're marching on West Wing Avenue there, yeah.
But people have pointed out the federal government's presence in a lot of jurisdictions is great, and somehow governors have not taken over federal property in other areas. So I think that is an anomalous argument that may be 200 years plus old. I don't think that this is a good argument. After all, I'm a taxpayer. I'm a Republican taxpayer, but the government doesn't seem to treat my greenbacks any differently than a Democratic greenbacks, and I don't have the ability through a voting representative in Congress to determine whether that should go to discretionary domestic spending, to the military, or whatever. There's something in my libertarian blood that says there's something fundamentally wrong with that. It's called taxation without representation. We fought about this for a long time, and we won, but we didn't win. It was strange.
Chuck, can I just add something? So I thought a couple years ago, well, maybe there was a good argument against statehood in the Federalist Papers. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Federalist Papers, I have a copy, and looked for the extensive discussion about disenfranchising the residents of the District of Columbia, and there is no discussion.
There wasn't a district, was there?
There was, but the Constitution talks about setting up this district, but they don't talk about the disenfranchising. It's just not part of the discussion at all. I don't know that there was any discussion, even behind closed doors in Philadelphia. I do know this. The population of the United States in 1790 was less than the population of the Washington metropolitan region today. And so whatever they envisioned being the federal district, and I'm not sure then that they knew for sure.
They didn't fully think people would be full-time residents here, right? I think they thought it was they thought it was going to be they'd come here, stay here while government was in session, and then go home.
Correct, and I'm not sure that they even knew for sure at the time of the Constitutional Convention they would be here on the Potomac. It was a Maryland Compromise, as I recall, but I don't think it had been decided, but this was, there was the city of Georgetown, the city of Alexandria, and not much else, and there weren't a whole lot of people. And I think they just didn't think about the fact that there are now 670,000 people here, and that we don't have the same rights and responsibilities, even though we send our sons and daughters to war and pay taxes and so forth.
Explain how the new, Mayor Bowser, explain the new federal district
Sure.
that you've outlined here. How, give us the geographic outlines and what would happen to people that lived in that new federal district, or would you make sure that they wouldn't?
Well, we had at our Monday, on the first day of the convention, our Office of Planning came and made a presentation with a new set of boundaries. There was a set of boundaries drawn up in the 80s, and the significant difference around that is that we have actually incorporated in this set of boundaries more federal, what had been considered federal land, including the joint base at Bowling. There was also another eco district that was set up then excluded from New Columbia that has been included. So we largely have the mall area and the White House and the Capitol and over to the Supreme Court, with the exception of one building, and that is our building, the John W. Wilson building. And we have the proposed boundaries do not include any current residential area.
So is the vision that nobody would actually then live in the federal district?
That
nobody
is-
would sleep, or unless congressmen are sleeping in their offices.
Correct.
Which we know some of them do.
And the president.
And of course, President sleeps in his office. And of course, the president. So, let me ask this, George. What would be some pitfalls, political pitfalls in the Constitution that you would recommend to your friends on the panel here not to include or be careful of if you want to continue to sort of make progress with Congress?
Well, Jamie is my kind of constitutional professor, so I think I would ask Jamie that question.
Oh, fair enough. I mean,
Well, yeah.
there is some, and I know the mayor's been very passionate about this, about limiting the number of political partisan statements in this Constitution.
But it's an interesting question, I applaud the effort to streamline the Constitution and make it, a fighting document that doesn't include everything that everybody wants for other purposes. There's a lot of time for a new state to develop its own policies on this or that issue. I think that if you're thinking about partisanship, you want to make sure that the structure of the Constitution is designed in such a way that it will be open to real partisan competition. Now, I haven't scrutinized it closely. Of course, when the Home Rule Act was written, there was the provision about the election of at-large council members, no more than 2 from any one political party, which has been the source of election of independents and statehood people and so on. But I took a quick look at it. I don't think that that's in there, and that would be a very unusual thing. And there are even federal constitutional questions about that kind of provision. On the other hand, there are lots of ways, if you talk to my friends at Fair Vote, for example, who are in the 8th Congressional District of Maryland in Tacoma Park, you can find them easily. There are lots of ways to build in a guarantee of real partisan competition and diversity in legislative bodies through the mode of election that you use, through different techniques of proportional representation, instant runoff voting, single transferable vote, cumulative voting. There are ways to make certain that you don't get a monolithic one-party control over a state legislature. And of course, that would be unusual. It wouldn't be unconstitutional, but it would be unusual if you had a state where everybody who got elected to the legislature came from one party. So, the New Columbia could model the best, most up-to-date mechanisms of making sure that there's real electoral competition and vitality by using some of those methodologies of voting.
Well, I would applaud that, and I would suggest that it is healthy for the district to have a rival party that competes for the votes of the district. It's not exactly as if a Republican in this district is going to look like a Republican from Louisiana. A Republican in this district is going to have to be pro-gay marriage. It's going to have to be very, very strong on enforcement of anti-discrimination laws. There's no question that a Republican running in this district may have different views on national defense or a variety of other subjects. But to appeal to the voters of this district, to try and get a majority of the voters of this district for being a senator or being a congressperson, it seems to me that you want some competition, and it's useful to have competition. So I would encourage, I will now look with some finer grain on the text of this document.
And let me ask this, Mayor Bowser, what's your vision of how the council turned legislature would then interact with the neighborhood boards? And do they become mini city, do we see sort of everything get
Sure. So you've
changed
touched,
or
yeah.
become like, where we have the city of Georgetown or something?
Sure. So I think you've touched on something that we've heard a lot in the town halls, that people, in fact, want to talk about how we have more democracy and how it would be different than what we have currently. What is in the draft would convert the city council to the state legislature. Some have asked, should it be bigger?
Seems quite small.
It is. It is small. It would be smaller than I think every state. And then some have suggested that maybe you should have a second chamber. And if we had a second chamber, could we look to part of our current structure, which is ANCs or ANC commissioners, and then still others have said, when we're a state, well, what's going to be our capital? And so I think that we have the opportunity to talk about how our wards can become the other
Could
units.
each ward be sort of almost like a city?
It would be
some structure-ish?
It would be something other than a ward. We would call it something different, but would be the second unit within our state, in our state system. And so those are the questions that the commission is dealing with, of how you convert a city into a state government, and that's what is outlined in the draft.
Chairman Mendelson, is it worth pursuing, going back to seeing if there's a court, going to the courts, is it worth pursuing multiple channels here, trying again in the courts, even though Jamie explained, going that far again, and pushing there so that there's double pressure on Congress to do something?
Well, I'm a strong believer in pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously if they're available. We went to court roughly 10 years ago. We thought we had a pretty good argument, and we did not prevail. At the moment, I don't know that there's a different argument. I do know that over time, arguments reveal themselves, and the state of the law does change. In fact, this was an argument we dealt with in the court regarding budget autonomy. Why were we raising this ability to amend the Home Rule Act in 2015 when we could have done this in 1990? Well, sometimes these arguments, these theories become apparent. As I'm sitting here today, I don't know what the argument would be in court. So I don't think there's a legal strategy right now, even though I appreciate that if there are multiple fronts on which we could put pressure on Congress.
Well, I guess, let me turn it another way. Since Congress is failing in its charge with dealing with the DC budget, could you sue Congress over how it handles, over the fact that essentially it's not been doing its job? I mean,
It's a nice
I throw that out.
idea.
I'm just throwing it out there. Where you haven't done your job and you're costing the taxpayers money. It's a.
Boy, is that a broad lawsuit.
I don't know.
Congress hasn't done
By the way,
its job.
who doesn't want to sue Congress these days? But
For not doing its job.
yeah, it would be, for not doing your job, it would be a lot of people would sign that class action lawsuit. But could there be a legal, for their failure to do their job with helping the city manage
I don't see
it?
it, but there are some creative attorneys out there.
Right here in the district. There's a lot of
That's
them.
what I mean, in the district out there. Walter Smith, I keep looking at him, he keeps coming up with theories.
See, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV.
I mean, I think it's worth always considering whether there's a strategy there. Absolutely.
That's the backstop.
And I think that there are other ways to put pressure on Congress.
Counselor?
Well, but I would just say, you know, that there's no salvation in the U.S. Supreme Court for anybody anymore. I think what we need is creative political theories for how to organize and to put this on the national agenda in a serious way, and to move it seriously in Congress and move it in the Democratic Party, bring it to the attention of the Republican Party. There's going to be a lot going on at that convention. Maybe somebody can sneak something in there.
I was just going to say, is it worth, you talked about Mayor Bowser meeting with the DNC.
Yes.
You know, is it worth trying to get a meeting with the RNC platform committee and saying, hey, even if it's simply getting them that there should be fairness when it comes to taxation, you know, even if they don't quite endorse statehood, you get them to endorse, you know, a fair treatment of taxpayers in the District of Columbia.
Well, sure. So we had the DC GOP testify at our Monday session, and actually the Republican platform does address DC statehood. It actually says that they oppose it ever being in the platform, or oppose DC statehood, something to that effect. So what the DC GOP is working on is getting them to be silent, to take it out of the opposition to statehood, out of the platform. And we, the commission, will approach this in a nonpartisan way. So just like we'll reach out to the DNC and to the Democratic candidates, we will do the same on the Republican side.
Well, I think I am out of questions. I will give everybody one last word that you want to get in. George, we'll start with you.
Oh, I think Jamie's right. This is a time for political argument and calling on the conscience of some people, and really getting Trump so angry at Mitch McConnell that he'll want 2 more senators just to irritate him.
I'm just telling you, I think he would trade, if he could put his name at the top of the old post office building, he would endorse DC statehood. Now, I don't know if I'm ready for that compromise, but I'm just saying, there's a way out of there. Chairman Mendelson.
I too think that in the near term, the solution is a political one, and so we have to be looking at different political strategies. Too often, I think the conversation about statehood is a conversation we in this room have amongst ourselves or with our friends in the district. And we've got to take that conversation outside the district to the 50 states.
Mayor Bowser, yeah, how do you convince Illinois Democrats to get fired up about this, or California Republicans to get fired up about this, or, you know, how do you get critical mass?
We have to build a sustained effort, and that is why I have been so focused with the commissioners on being very urgent right now and taking advantage of the election that is upcoming and using these months to really get organized across the 50 states. So the commission has a 50-state committee that is drafting a strategy to do that. But part of it is all of us, when we have the opportunity. I'm going in any city I go to, I'm trying to get a meeting with the editorial board, so to talk about DC statehood. I also think that we outline a strategy for all of the colleges and universities that are in the district that have thousands of alum all across the country who still have a connection to Washington, D.C. and care about what happens to Washington, D.C. But also, Chuck, there is just education that has to happen. You go to many states, they're not thinking about Washington. It never occurred to them that we are any different than they are.
Well, they think about it, but not in a positive way.
Not in a positive way. So we want them to think about local Washington and having that sustained effort to do that. But part of talking about this during a heated presidential race brings more attention to what we're doing across the country.
And Jamie, what do you think it's going to take? I mean, you're not serving in Congress yet, barring some bizarre scenario that not saying what we assume Maryland 8 is going to do in November. Well, what do you think you can do when you're in there to sort of keep the pressure on? And are you going to make a commitment, even though these aren't your constituents, to keep the pressure on?
Absolutely. The people of D.C. are going to have a new friend in Congress in January. And
So we got our first vote.
but, again, I think everybody's got to look to history because the congressional treatment of the District of Columbia has been a barometer of what's taking place in our national politics. And during times of progressive change like Reconstruction after Civil War, the district got lots of home rule, and there was a real investment in the city, and there was a council and so on. And at the end of Reconstruction, that was precisely when home rule got revoked for the District of Columbia. And it wasn't again until the modern civil rights movement that the district picked up momentum again and got the city council and the mayor and the delegate position, which was recreated. So it's a big deal. It's not a little deal. It's a big deal in terms of the national politics of the country. And we've got to be honest about the fact, as Democrats, and I'm here as a passionate, ardent, true blue Democrat, we had a Democratic president in Bill Clinton with concurrent Democratic majorities for a couple of years when he came to office, and we were not able to pass forward motion or statehood for the district. And the exact same thing happened after 2008 when President Obama got elected. And so I think that the mayor is absolutely right to convene everybody now to say, if this is going to happen, if this can be on the agenda, it's got to be early, it's got to be high, and there's got to be a lot of pressure. And my answer to your question about, well, what's the best argument against DC statehood? If we're going to be honest about it, people are going to say, nobody's fighting for it.
That's right.
That's the best argument against it, because you got to fight for statehood if you want statehood. Because the constitutional arguments, I think, are specious. We understand the political character of those other arguments, and I applaud the people here for saying, give it a serious try. I believe, I hope, that political conditions are forming around the country for a landslide election. There could be some big changes across the board, and this should be part of those changes.
Thanks very much. George, you said you wanted to add one quick thing.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mayor Bowser and Chairman Mendelson. You are my mayors and my council chair, even though we're of different parties. So thank you for taking this on and making it a big deal.
Thank you. Thanks, George.
Well, I want to thank everybody. And let me just make one recommendation. I look out in this room and I don't see enough millennials in here. And this is why I want, I see some. You need to recruit more of your friends, because I actually believe that we're in a moment where there is this, millennials have the mindset of nothing is set in stone, right? And I think sometimes the older we get, the more used to, we keep thinking, oh, well, that never happens. I always say that to myself. I don't want to get been there, done that disease. I always worry about it in politics. I worry about it in covering stories. But the beauty of engaging the millennials, they're social disruptors of the best order right now. By the way, if the millennials don't solve our problems, we're in trouble, because there's too many of them now. You're dominating us. You're going to run this country. But if you can create that, it has been fascinating to me to watch. I think the massive change we've seen, the social change we've seen over the last decade has been powered by sort of this attitude of millennials who have been like, well, the old rules don't have to apply if you organize and you push pretty hard. So that would be my, next time you convene this, there should be a lot more of our millennial friends in here, because I think they can help nationalize this in ways that can galvanize it. Thanks very much. It was an honor to do this.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Stay close. Stay close.
Why don't we get the commissioners back up here? Thank you again, Chuck and George and Jamie.
I'm going to take the papers off as well.
Where? Where?
Check it this too.
Thank you. can come back to order. And again, I want to thank the panel. And I don't mean to be thanking myself as the mayor, but to be thanking George Vredenberg, Jamie Raskin, and of course the moderator, Chuck Todd. We're now going to hear from Omarosa Menegalt. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If you want to come up here to the podium. She is vice chair of the Diversity Council for the Trump campaign. And we'll hear from her. And then after that, we will begin with public comment, testimony, and discussion. We think folks are going to have to come up here, although we're trying to see if we can figure out a more efficient way to enable everybody to, who wants to comment.
You have to speak into the microphone.
So again, let me introduce Omarosa Menegalt. And good evening.
Good evening. I am Reverend Omarosa Menegalt, the assistant pastor of Weller Street Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles, to this great New Columbia Statehood Commission, to my good friend, Madam Mayor, to you, my brothers and sisters, I greet you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I am not here on behalf of any political party, but as a former resident of the District of Columbia. You see, I came here in 1996, 97, to study at Howard University, where I got my master's degree and did my doctoral study, and I am now a professor of branding and marketing in the executive MBA program at Howard. I bought my first home here in the District of Columbia. What I did not realize when I moved to DC and became a homeowner for the first time was, Madam Mayor, I would be giving up my rights, my voice, my power. And so now I stand in front of you to say that we can be all on different teams, different political parties, but we have to be on the same side with this. I understand that most of the country don't know what happens in the district. They don't know that 680,000 residents have no vote, they have no voice, they have no power, that they are taxed, that they serve in the military, that they serve on federal juries. But they are not created in the same way as others in other states. And let me explain that. We go out all over the world advocating democracy. Blood is spilled in the name of democracy. I serve in the California State Military Reserve as a military chaplain, where I see young men and women go and serve every single day in the name of democracy. But the residents of the District of Columbia are deprived of democracy. And so I say that democracy deprived is democracy denied. I'm a Baptist preacher, y'all gonna have to talk to me. Just turn to your neighbor and say, democracy deprived. Come on, talk to each other.
It's democracy denied.
There you go.
Is democracy denied? And so I came here, I flew in from Los Angeles. Y'all know there were some storms last night, but even as I was on my flight, I had a chance to think about this. Why would anyone in California care about what's happening in the District of Columbia or in Illinois? They should care because you matter. Your voice matters. What you do in the District of Columbia matters. The billions of dollars that you pay in taxes matter. But yet you can't even designate how that money is spent or where it goes. You can't even determine how it's allocated when they add these riders onto your budget. Democracy deprived is democracy denied. I am a Baptist preacher, so I'm gonna go to the word. Is that all right? Yeah. The word tells me my people perish because of a lack of knowledge. And so the world must know, the country must know, Madam Mayor, they must know that District of Columbia residents are serving this country proudly in the military. They must know that there are 30,000 veterans who have no representation. They must know that $26.4 billion of taxes come from the district. They must know that these contributions should be controlled locally. They also must know that we demand that the District of Columbia becomes the 51st state of this great nation. And so can I go old school on you? Y'all gonna participate? What do we want?
Statehood.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Statehood.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Statehood.
When do we want it?
Now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Omarosa.
Thank you, Ms. Manigault, Reverend Manigault. So let's turn now to citizen testimony and discussion. I believe we have a live microphone hooked up down here now?
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't see anybody there, so we can go home now? No.
No.
Oh, yes, I do have a list. I have a long list.
Ooh. Oh my gosh.
All these...
Can we turn the microphone so they're facing the audience?
Eugene. Yes. Eugene, all these folks asked to testify? Yes. All right, it's a very long list. All right, Bill Lewis.
Oh, you are, okay.
Followed by Kishan Puta, and then Tia Smart. If you folks could line up.
Okay.
And that would be followed by Peter Rosenstein.
Good evening.
Hold on just a moment. There's somebody who is keeping time in the front row and also in the middle, so if you'd be mindful. Because we have a lot of folks. When the time's up, I'm going to ask you to wind up.
Okay. I will be brief. Madam Mayor, City Councilman Middleton, State Senator Strauss and Brown, and Representative Garcia. I'd like to state a case for statehood, taxation without representation. Historically, the U.S. Congress has treated the District of Columbia as a colony, which contradicts the very reason this country ended its relationship with the British in 1776. Taxation without representation. Today, the district residents have been disenfranchised from the national government because we have no vote in Congress. Our vote is in the form of non-voting delegate to the House of Representatives. D.C. has 2 senators and 1 congressional representative comprising of a shadow congressional delegation that lobbies Congress for D.C. statehood. Since 1841, the district has been under the control of Congress. In that year, Congress passed the Organic Act, which incorporated the new federal city under total control as permitted by the District Clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution. This made the district no longer a part of any state. We lost our voting representation in Congress, the Electoral College, and voice in constitutional amendments, and the right to home rule. This fact raised protest from district residents. In 1950, civil rights era helped the district efforts to win voting rights. In 61, the district was granted votes in the Electoral College in proportion with our size as we were as many to a state. Since 1960, we have voted for 9 presidents, gotten home rule, elected 7 mayors, hosted a host of city council members, ANC commissioners. We have proven we can self-government, and the time has come for us to have full representation in Congress. We want statehood, and we want it now.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Puta, Kishan Puta.
Okay, he did.
Go next.
He's not ready.
All right. Tia Smart.
I think you can hand, yeah, hand it to him.
Excuse me, ma'am.
There you go.
I just wanted to know when I was. Just
let her go. Just tell her to go.
Ma'am, do you want to speak?
Yes.
Well, then please speak.
I'm sorry if I'm out of order.
I assumed you were Miss Smart. I guess you're not, but why don't you please take the microphone? You will be followed by Peter Rosenstein, if you could get ready.
Thank you, sir. Hi, my name is Jeanette Parker, and I live in the district. And I am a voting DC resident and a voting US citizen. I am executive director of the Medical Whistleblower Advocacy Network, which is a group that works on human rights. And therefore, I report on human rights problems that might be within our government, the US government, in relationship to international human rights treaties. I reported in my last report at the Universal Periodic Review that the citizens of DC were being denied participatory rights in our national government and refused the right to be able to speak their mind and to be properly democratically represented. This is a violation of a treaty which is both signed and ratified by the US Congress. It is the ICCPR, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And I report regularly on any problems in regards to the US obligations on the ICCPR. I am a person with disabilities. And we recently had a treaty in front of the US Congress to be possibly ratified. It was already signed by President Obama, and it was up for ratification. There was strong bipartisan support for this treaty. It is the treaty for the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the treaty that honors the human rights of every disabled person in the world when the countries sign and ratify this treaty. President Obama was fully behind the ratification of the CRPD, and we had very, very strong support. However, I, as a disabled woman living in the city and the district of DC, I had no representative at the Senate to represent me, to vote for me, to vote for all the DC residents who might be disabled here in the district. And so that is why I'm strongly in support of statehood and why I want to help work with the commission to try to bring forward the issues to the ICCPR, to whom I regularly report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. May I suggest to the timekeeper in the front row, maybe if you are willing to move over to that seat there so the speaker can see you. So while Peter Rosenstein is coming forward, he will be followed by Candace Nelson, and then Juan Thompson, and then Jeff Nolan. So if they could be ready. Following Mr. Rosenstein will be Candace Nelson.
Since I moved to the district in 1978, I've needed glasses, so excuse that. I've been in favor and spoken out for statehood since moving to the District of Columbia in 1978 from New York City. It was when I quickly realized in doing so I had given up my representation in Congress. I continue to pay federal taxes, but no longer have a right to elect senators or congressperson with the right to vote on what is done with those taxes. Over the past nearly 40 years, there have been a number of initiatives in Congress to grant statehood to the district, all falling far short of success. When I was involved in leading the fight for marriage equality, there was a general fear that Congress would stop us and we would have little recourse. They have intervened in our budgets and legislation over the years as they wouldn't in any other states. They have used us as a petri dish, mandating that we have programs giving public money to private and parochial schools in the form of vouchers, something they wouldn't have the guts to do in any state that they represent. Through the commission and through the perseverance of Mayor Bowser, these issues are now being brought again to the public forefront. The mayor has asked that an initiative be put on the November ballot, and I support that initiative. But we do need to realize, as Delegate Eleanor Norton has said, the effort should not be judged by whether it achieves statehood, but whether it brings much-needed energy to our push to become the 51st state. That energy around the country is going to be crucial, and during this election cycle, it's even more so, as the mayor has said. The challenge is overcoming what people don't understand about the District of Columbia. Most people think the District of Columbia is Congress. They have no idea it's the 650,000 people that live here that very often hate Congress as much as they do. I've read the latest draft proposal and draft proposed constitution. I only have a few comments. The first refers to Article 1, Legislative Branch, Section 2, which covers composition, election of members, and vacancies. I believe if we are to be a state, we need more than 13 people doing the work of the legislature. I have not determined the right composition, but I think it needs to be bigger. I think there needs to be more representation. But if it's determined that only 13 people will do the work, I fully believe that we need to change Section 3, which is qualifications for holding office and compensation. No person serving on that House of Delegates should be allowed to have an outside job. My final comment is about having a section in the Constitution to revisit with an additional constitutional convention a few years after we achieve statehood. There are many things we will have looked at now that we won't have understood or exactly done the right way the first time. We have to have a mandate that there will be another look at this, let's say 3 years after we have achieved statehood. We have another constitutional convention and correct any of the deficiencies that are in the current Constitution. I believe we need to move forward with this. I applaud the mayor, the council, and the commission for moving on it. It's time to put this on the ballot in November, and it's time to get the kind of huge vote that we got for Hillary Clinton last week for statehood.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rosenstein. Candace Nelson, come forward, and she will be followed by Juan Thompson and then Jeff Nolan.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you to the members of the New Columbia Statehood Commission, Mayor Muriel Bowser, Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, Senators Paul Strauss and Michael Brown, and Representative Franklin Garcia. I am Candace Tiana Nelson. And if you haven't noticed yet, you may start to notice right about now that I'm not a native Washingtonian. I'm originally from Winchester, Virginia. I share a hometown with Patsy Cline. So if you hear a twang or two, it's not an act. It's an accent. When my accent and I moved to the District of Columbia, we did not appreciate the fact that I was losing representation in the United States Senate. Nor did we appreciate the fact that my congresswoman in the House of Representatives was only allowed to vote in committee. The moment I signed the papers to buy my condo in Ward 4 on Rittenhouse Street, I joined the fight against taxation without representation. I have been an active member of the Ward 4 Democrats for 9 years, serving as legislative co-chair for 2 years, treasurer for 4 years, first vice president for 2 years, and now I am president. After helping to raise the issue of statehood through the Ward 4 Democrats for 9 years, I can honestly say we are now the closest we've ever been in nearly a decade. We cannot stop this momentum. We must continue to work together. There may be a few things that you don't like, so remember, we can agree to disagree without removing our support for one another. Never before have we gotten this much attention on this important issue. We must continue through this process and ensure that there is a big result on Tuesday, November 8th. The larger the number of the residents that vote on this referendum, the larger the message we send to Congress. I urge you to support the mayor, her plan, and this process. I urge you to call all your family members and friends and tell them to call their senators and their representatives in the House and request of them to make statehood a platform in the upcoming Democratic and Republican conventions. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the Democratic National Convention because on May 21st at the DC Democratic Caucus, I was elected to be a part of the district delegation to vote for Hillary Clinton at the Democratic National Convention. We know she supports the District of Columbia's residents having the appropriate representation. I'm with her, I'm with Mayor Bowser, I'm with Council Chair Phil Mendelson and the members of this commission, and I'm with all of you. We are no different than any other Americans. So I will leave you with this. When I was up until 2:12 a.m. the other night watching that amazing filibuster, I was proud to be a Democrat. I was proud of the Senate Democrats. However, I was upset that I could not say that my senator participated. Friends from Virginia were texting and tweeting and all about their senators, Senator Warner, Senator Kaine. But who was I going to text or tweet about? Senator non-existent? It does not feel good to be left out. So ask yourself, what could you do, what should you do, and what will you do to ensure that we are treated equal and given the right representation, because after all, it is our right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Juan Thompson, followed by Jeff Nolan.
Eugene Kinlow told me to come in now. I'm Kishan Putta, and I was second, and I had biked here up from downtown, and I'm very sorry that I missed my turn.
Please go forward.
All right. Hey everyone, Kishan Putta, and I've been working with some other great volunteers on the communications working group for the Statehood Commission, and I'm really pleased that this is all coming together. I wasn't planning to testify, but my esteemed colleague Eugene Kinlow requested I do, and I am happy to do so. I am a former ANC commissioner here in DC from DuPont Circle, and I think of the working group co-chairs, I'm the one ANC commissioner. So I'll just speak for the commissioners and say that I do agree with Peter's comments about ideally having a more representative, a larger, wider representative legislature. I understand that the goal is to get statehood with as little complication as possible. I generally speaking agree with that. However, certain things that have been talked about for decades in the city, if they haven't happened yet, we can't really say, oh, we're gonna deal with that afterwards once we get statehood. We can probably come to an agreement, I believe. I understand it would be shaking up the system to expand the legislature, but we should try. I believe we should try. It doesn't have to be crazy. We have 40 ANC commissions across our city. They are neighborhoods. Each of those commissions is a neighborhood, and they have commissioners within them. But perhaps each of those neighborhoods could have a delegate, an assemblyman, if you will, and that could be a small legislature of 40. And we praise the ANC commissioners and their service all the time, but I think it's time to put a little money where our mouths are on that and go for more representation. And that's what I came here to say. So thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Pucci. Juan Thompson, followed by Jeff Nolan, followed by Aaron Petrie.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the commission. My name is Juan Manuel Thompson, and I'm a proud resident of Ward 7 in the Penn Branch neighborhood. As a native of the city, I am proud to serve on a number of boards, including the DC Democratic State Committee, who some members are here in the audience, the DC Latino Caucus, and the NAACP. I'm here tonight to testify before you on the need to support statehood. Support of the funding of the commission as an independent agency within the DC government is crucial to promoting statehood. We need the Constitution we are working on tonight to be drafted as soon as possible. All states work on their Constitution every 2 or 3 years, so drafting it quickly with a precise document will be vital to our cause. This Constitution needs a sound footing within the committees that are here, that are assembled. I urge Washingtonians that are here tonight to make sure that on November 11th, we vote positively for this Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Jeff Nolan, followed by Aaron Petrie, followed by Tom Sneeringer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Nolan. I'm a resident of Ward 1 in Mount Pleasant. I'm a newer resident to the District of Columbia. I've lived here for 2 years, and I wanted to talk about the case for statehood and what it means for me, being an LGBT American living in the District of Columbia, and why it's important that statehood reflects me. So I'm originally from Covington, Georgia. If you don't know where that is, don't worry about it. You're not alone. Just know that it's a dot on the map outside of Atlanta. But like lots of small towns throughout the South and throughout lots of places in this country, I was not accepted for who I was. And I came to Washington, D.C., and I found a home, and I found a place that protected my rights. I found a place where I was accepted, and I found a place where I could be who I wanted to be and not be scared of that. So, thank you. So for me, what statehood means for me is that my rights and the protections that the district has given me are not subjected to the whims of Congress and congressional officials that demonize who I am and demonize my community. And I want to make sure that even though I am a new resident, DC is my home. DC is where I'm going to create my family, and DC is where I will be for a very, very, very long time. So I want to ensure that our laws are not subjected to the whims of congressional officials. I want my tax dollars to be spent by the leaders I elected in a way that benefits my community, and I want the concerns of our residents to be brought to the halls of Congress by leaders they elected that have the power to not only draft legislation, but to vote on the issues that matter to their constituents. So the fight for statehood is important. It has far-reaching consequences. Like many Americans, I recently mourned the events that happened to my community in Orlando, Florida. As an LGBT American, I was angry, I was sad, I was hurt. I was upset to think of the role that some of our policies and some of our negative rhetoric had on that tragic event. But unfortunately, who was I going to call in Congress that actually had the power to vote on the policies that can prevent these things from happening? Who was I to call? I didn't have a voice. I don't have a voice still in the Congress. So I'm proud of the work that the Statehood Commission is doing. I am proud that they are doing the work that needs to be done to ensure that our voices are echoing through the halls of Congress. Thank you, Mayor Bowser, for your work. Thank you for the Statehood Commission. And thank you for everything that you're doing. And let's get to voting, and let's turn out the vote and ensure that our voices are heard in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Aaron Petrie, followed by Tom Sneer,
Oh, not that low. Okay, there we go.
followed by Kamar Mack.
Hi, my name is Erin Petrie. I've been a district resident for nearly 10 years, which is almost as long as I've legally been able to vote. So that's kind of terrible for me. And I live in Ward 5. First off, I'd just like to make a quick comment about the name of New Columbia. I think that we should really examine this because I think that we should pick a name that's more representative of us as a people rather than naming ourselves after an infamous imperialist who represents something that we are working against rather than working for. So I'd like everyone to kindly consider that. I come from Kentucky. I feel like there's a lot of people from the South here. And it's a state where I guess I used to have the right, though briefly, to vote for my congressional representation. When I moved to DC to pursue a career in international relations, I lost that right that I was constitutionally given as a citizen of the United States. For nearly a decade, I've built a life in a place so proximate to lawmaking, yet I am still so far removed and disenfranchised from that process. I am soon about to buy my first home, and it breaks my heart that I actually have to consider whether to stay in this place I've called home for years or abandon my city in order to move only a few miles across a river in order to enjoy the rights over 99% of my fellow Americans do. It's not just that the residents of Kentucky, a state that also used to be part of Virginia, and a lot of people in Kentucky have not been to DC, have more say over my rights and what is done with my tax dollars than I do. As I explained to my mother, Mom, you have more say over what we do with DC taxes than I do. And I thought I had long passed the days when I lived under the rule of what mother thinks best. So finally, I would really like to commend the plan that they've put forward to redraw the boundaries of what is the federal district and what is the new state. Because it takes the Capitol, it takes the monuments, it takes everything, you do on that 8th grade trip and says, this is the federal district. Because a lot of people on those 8th grade trips, they don't see the rest of DC. And I think that this redrawing really does also demonstrate to the rest of America that DC really is much more than politics. We're much more than Congress. We're much more than a Capitol building. We are families. We are small business. We are culturally vibrant and unique. In that way, it's also like the rest of America, and it's time that we finally are given the full rights we are due by the Constitution as citizens of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrie. Mr. Tom Sneeringer, followed by Kamar Mack.
Thank you to the Commission for this opportunity to make a statement. I agree with many of the things that were said tonight, especially up on the panel about empowering a more competitive political system. I think what method that we use for our elections is quite important, as Jamie Raskin said, and I don't know if that has to be in the Constitution, but I think we have to be committed to that. But I want to make a very practical point here from my experience as a federal lobbyist of a long career. And by the way, I serve on the advocacy committee, and I'm looking forward to taking this message to the Hill when that time comes. A number of our citizens have complained about not being able to contact anybody on the Hill on matters of great personal importance to them, and of course that puts us all in a second-class citizenship status. But as a lobbyist, and as many of you know,
this town and a lot of national politics runs at the collective level. You've got trade associations, labor unions, professional societies, networks of social service agencies, etc. What happens, and we've all seen it in the ads on television, when a national organization has a congressional objective, what do? They contact all their members and they say, call your congressman, call your senators, tell them to vote for this or against that. And so what happens to the people who are relegated to basically being registered to vote in the district, or who have their business or labor union headquarters in the district? Who are they going to call? Nobody. And so not only do we have the second-class citizenship just on a personal level, we also have it at that collective institutional level. And you start seeing national organizations thinking of the people in the district as being more or less useless and certainly without influence. So I don't think that's what we want. And so for that reason, I'm one of the reasons I'm supporting statehood.
Thank you, Mr. Sneeringer. Kamar Mack, followed by Maura McDonough. And after Maura McDonough will be Natpa Raman. Proceed.
So first I want to thank Mayor Bowser, Chairman Mendelson, Senator Strauss, Senator Brown, Representative Garcia. I want to thank all of you for hosting this great event. And also, I don't know if Chuck Todd's still here, but thank you to him as well. My name is Kamar Mack, and I'm a student at Georgetown, so I'll be living in the district for at least 3 more years. But I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm very happy and very thankful to hear that DC is looking to become adopted through the same method as my home state. And I also feel very blessed to share my testimony as to why I feel determined to support DC statehood and sort of what I want the steps to be to help make it happen. As I've gotten to know the people of DC, I feel so confident that the leaders of this great district can run an efficient, dynamic state legislature that will strive for justice and prosperity for everyone in the district. And now I'm personally making a pledge to spread the word about why this issue is so grave. Because my generation, we're a social media savvy generation. We love to build coalitions across the country. And so we need to make sure that everyone in America knows why it's so important that DC needs to become a state. A lot of the statements from today have talked about people like myself who've come from other places, moved to the district, and now we realize, oh wait, we don't have representation. And so we want to make sure that everyone across the entire nation knows that this issue is happening. Because if you ask people from other places, they would think that people in DC would have the same rights, if not more rights. And so my friends from back home know that I don't always support Democrats, I don't always support Republicans. But this issue very much needs to transcend parties. This issue comes down to, this is an issue that needs to bridge the gap. Wherever you are across the aisle, we need to understand that DC statehood is something that is a fundamental aspect of our country. People need to have representation in Congress. And so I just want to close by saying that I and other students at Georgetown, we're working hard every day to build that coalition. And so I urge everyone, call your family from other places in the country. Start spreading the word, because that's how we're going to build that coalition. Like Mayor Bowser, I love how you said this issue needs to touch all 50 states. And so we should work hard every day to get that done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Ms. Maura McDonough, followed by Neba Rahman. And then following her will be Romaine Thomas.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mara McDonough. I am also a student at Georgetown University, and I'm a member of the student government there. I just wanted to use this time to briefly explain why DC statehood is so important to me. I'm from Boston originally, but now I'm a college student, deeply interested in politics. I have nowhere else to go but DC. Yet, I was very surprised to learn when I came here for college that we don't have voting rights in the area. For someone like me, who is fortunate enough to choose where I get to live, this poses such a strange question. If I choose to live in my favorite city when I graduate, I'd be conceding my right to vote. That's strange, but what's absolutely infuriating is whether I move or stay, there will always be a population here within the US that does not have rights. Many other students at Georgetown end up living in DC after they graduate, and I believe that this is massively important that my peers will have equal rights no matter where they choose to live. Those who live in DC don't just contribute to this district, but to the nation as a whole. This upcoming generation will face many obstacles, but the basic guaranteed right to vote shouldn't be one of them. As someone who is majoring in government, I have studied in depth the principles of American democracy and why our system is so unique in the world. Using my analytical understanding of the democratic system, I believe that the lack of DC statehood is a grave faltering of how our country is intended to function. I'm also majoring in sociology, which allows me to reflect and understand the impact a lack of voting rights can have on a society. My conclusion is that taking away voting rights from a society is equivalent to silencing that society. Honestly, this is an issue that's very easy to ignore if you're not in DC or the adjacent states. The irony is that you don't hear complaints or protests about this in other states, because here in DC, we have no channel to speak for ourselves through government, at least not on the scale that other states do. And so the lack of statehood is effectively silencing a portion of Americans, and I know there is nobody in this room that considers silencing a specific portion of Americans to be a democratic ideal. DC was created as a federal district for our country's government. In the intervening years, it has clearly turned into so much more. We are now a district over 670,000 people. Despite our lack of representation, DC residents have created a place with its own culture, history, and voice. It is time to make that voice count by giving citizens the voting rights that they deserve. I want to make my home in DC, and to do so, I need to make sure that our country truly lives up to the standards that it sets for ourselves. As such, I am a strong proponent of DC statehood, and I urge you to be too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDonough. Neighbor Rahman? I apologize if I mispronounced your name. And you will be followed by Romaine Thomas and then Jim Bubar.
Hey, thank you guys all so much for having me. My name is Neba Rahman. I am a rising sophomore at Georgetown University, and I'm here to tell you why I stand in favor of DC statehood. So growing up, we all learned from the very beginning that there are 50 states. It was kind of like a law of physics, something that you took as a given and didn't really argue with, and it was never going to change. Then you ended up learning that those 50 states were the very backbone of the American democracy that we're all so proud of. But that's exactly why we're all here. It's because democracy only exists in those 50 states, and that's something that needs to change. Now, whenever DC statehood came up as a child or growing up, it always did spark a debate, and there were strong arguments on both sides, but DC statehood ended up winning. But it was just that. It was just a debate, just talk. Nothing ever actually came out of those impassioned feelings, those impassioned arguments that people had. And because it was just about talking and not action, nothing ended up getting done. But now, for the first time in my lifetime, I'm seeing that change. When I came to DC for college, I found a city of people who do. People who take action on things that they're passionate about, whatever it is. And it is these people that need to have the right to vote. And we're finally making that a possibility. We asked earlier in this evening why it is that millennials aren't involved in this debate, in this discussion. And they should be. Because for us, it isn't just about the economic benefits, the political benefits, or even getting the right to vote. It's an opportunity for us to actually see something that we've been talking about for years become a reality. The reason that I and a lot of other millennials stand with DC statehood is because it's an opportunity for us to take these words and make them an action. It's an opportunity for us to let the next generation learn about 51 states, not just 50. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Rahman. Romaine Thomas. And she will be followed by Jim Bubar and then Robert Branham.
Let me say good evening to everyone that's here.
Good evening.
And especially to our mayor and to our chairperson for the city council and to Senator Brown and Senator Strauss and also Representative Strauss.
Garcia,
Okay.
Garcia.
I mean Garcia, as well as I know you. And I see my friend here too. So I do want to say that my name is Romaine B. Thomas, and I was born in this city, delivered at home in the community of Trinidad. So that tells you how old I am.
There you go.
So let me say, people ask, what are older folks for? There are not that many older folks in here, but there are some that I do know how old they are. So all of our elders, raise your hands, because it's good to have you here. And we're thankful. And I want to say, let's give a round of applause to these passionately speaking young folk who came up and gave us such a delightful deliberation. And as I talk, I say that's what old folks are for. You can link the past and link the present and link the future and give a standard in terms of what the foundation is and where we are. And as I said, I am Romaine Thomas, and I'm a longtime advocate for children, for families, and for citizens, and also a community organizer and leader. And I currently serve as chairperson for the Commission on Aging. And I'm glad to recognize that we do have one of our commissioners here, Mr. Hicks, Charles Hicks. Hold up your hand to let everybody know that you are here. And I must say that I'm proud to be present here and to be part of this deliberation. And on a personal note, let me say this, and somebody gonna say, oh, I thought that, but I didn't know. But I am the widow of the former council member, Harry L. Thomas. And anybody who knew Harry knew he was a humanitarian, that he cared about people, he cared what happened, and he was passionately concerned about statehood. And he was in that first committee that established and started Statehood. And it's so wonderful to have our mayor and the other council members and members of the commission to build on that foundation. Often we forget about a foundation and we think that it starts right where you come in, but it starts long before that. And we must remember that. And it starts for us way back when we first came over here to America. And I won't go into all the history of it because we have had that stated here tonight, and I won't take up that time, but we know the history books and we know what the story is all about, and we know what the journey is about. So it means that we got to continue to fight and to move forward for that journey. And I am very proud to be present here, as I said. And I know that I will continue to be involved. I'm here to represent all of those folks who have been here and they're no longer upon this earth, but they have left their footprints all over the pages, all over the communities, all over the neighborhoods. So we want to continue that fight. And I'm proud to be here again because, as I said, I want to continue in that fight. And we have heard over and over again about the unjust, shameful treatment of us as citizens. So we can't tolerate that any longer. We are going to continue to move forward and to fight. And we're here tonight to follow up on that constitutional adjustment that we are trying to move forward with and to give that support. And I see the time is telling me to stop, but I do want to say that we're not going to stop moving ahead for statehood. Aaron's going to do that. Let us all say we're going to move ahead to statehood. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Jim Bubar, followed by Robert Brown.
Good evening, my fellow delegates.
Good evening.
My name is Jim Bubar, and I want to thank the Democratic voters of the District of Columbia for electing me to be a delegate to the Democratic National Convention on behalf of Hillary Clinton. Thank you very much.
All right.
I also want to thank my colleagues at the bar for re-electing me to another term on the DC Affairs section of the bar. And I want to use my terms to promote statehood and full democracy for the residents of the District of Columbia. Its statehood will guarantee to the residents of the District of Columbia full congressional voting representation, budget and legislative autonomy, and all of the rights that the people of the 50 United States enjoy, but we do not. Now, my remarks tonight are my own, but I also want to quote someone else. Winston Churchill once said that Americans will always do the right thing after they try everything else first. We've been fighting for equal rights in the District of Columbia since 1801. That's a long time. And it's time for Americans to do the right thing. It's time for Americans to grant DC statehood. Now, I've reviewed the proposed Constitution, and while there's always room for improvement, I think it's a very competent statement based on the best practices of the 50 states. But I do want to make one little suggestion to the drafters of the map. Well, I'm sure this is not going to be overlooked. I want to caution you to draw a little line around that certain hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue so that a certain Republican will not end up with 3 electoral votes. I want to commend the mayor, thank you, Mayor Bowser, and the commission for all of their work, and I'd like to offer my assistance. And thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Bubar. Robert Branham. And he will be followed by Harold Hunter and then Mark Plotkin.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Robert Benson Branham. I am a proud resident of Ward 5, and I'm glad to be here. And I want to say that as a retired veteran, willing to put my life on the line for statehood and the right to vote for people around the world, I'm an activist in this city, and I'm willing to go to jail for statehood and to have joined members of the panel who went to jail with me. It is time, that time is now, and we need to tell the world that the District of Columbia needs statehood and that we oppose racism, we oppose bigotry, and we oppose misogyny, and it will not be elected in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. Harold Hunter. Is Mr. Hunter here? Mark Plotkin? Mr. Plotkin will be followed by Colby, it looks like it says Colby Sullins.
I want to say thank you to the panel. This is my 3rd appearance, but I can't stop about talking about statehood, and I can't pass up the opportunity. And I warn you, I understand I'm talking tomorrow too, so please indulge me. Just a little realpolitik history. I've said some of these things before, but like Bernie Sanders, I give the same speech. You'll have to excuse me. We cannot define defeat as victory. In 1993, there was a statehood vote. It got 153 votes. The number was 218. One Republican, we should mention his name, was a profound courage, Wayne Gilchrist. And he went over to our delegate and said, it's a question of dignity. We had an opportunity in 93, and it never even moved in the Senate. And we got to name names. And it's because of John Glenn, who's no national hero to me, and Jim Sasser, who wouldn't move the bill in the Senate. We had another opportunity in 2009, and we shouldn't have gone for a modicum of democracy. We should have gone for statehood. Just like in 93, we had overwhelming majorities in both the House and the Senate, filibuster-proof. In 2014, we didn't have a Democratic House, but we had a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate, and Tom Carper of Delaware had a hearing, and he didn't even talk to his fellow Democrats, and one Republican showed up, Tom Coburn. We can't allow that to happen again. So I'm the Paul Revere. I'm saying we cannot allow, I disagree with my fellow Republican, I admire that Republican, but it's not a long view. It's a short window. It's 2017. The first year it has to be done, and we can't fool around. And we have a test. The mayor was too kind about Neera Tanden, who was Hillary Clinton's a representative on the platform committee. I hounded her. I walked her out of the building. She would not commit to having statehood in the platform. If Hillary Clinton isn't going to insist that statehood, the word statehood, be in the platform, then we don't have a chance in 2017. And I'll close with this, which I closed before, which is really a summons. I've been at this too long. I've lived here 52 years. I want it to happen. I'm getting old. I want it to happen in my lifetime, okay? He said it will. I said to Jesse Jackson when he was the statehood senator, when will it ever change? And this is the charge to all these people and to us. When it rises to the level of personal insult, we bow, we got to be insulted and act on it. Thank you.
Colby Sullins. Followed by Eric. Now, some people, I can't read their writing too well. It looks like it says Pavereski. Okay, you will be next. And then David Schwartzman. Please proceed, Mr. Sullins.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Chairman, Senators, Representative, my fellow U.S. citizens of the District of Columbia. My name is Colby Sullins. I'm an Air Force veteran, a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy and American University Washington College of Law. I'm currently enrolled at the George Washington University Law School. My wife graduated from the George Washington University Law School. We've been here in the district for about 9 years. I'm from Arizona. My wife's from New Hampshire, both states with strong cultures of liberty and self-determination. And we were glad to join you here and become part of this community because we believe so strongly that this community deserves to have a voice in Congress. My wife would be here today, but she's more than 9 months pregnant, and wooden chairs seemed like a bridge too far. So I have my phone on me. But we are excited to welcome our son into this great community, this fantastic, diverse, welcoming, warm-hearted, caring community that deserves to share those views and that perspective in Congress at the national level. So I have a very limited time. I've got 3 points to make. First, the name. I propose the name of our state should be Anacostia. New Columbia, where's old Columbia? Columbia is a concept, an idea, a personification of the ideals of liberty that this country espouses. And as a concept, she's beautiful and wonderful and amazing, but she takes a lot of explanation, especially when we have the history of Christopher Columbus and a country in South America that sounds just like it. So I propose Anacostia because it represents our history, our present, and our future. The history of the Anacostia people, I'm gonna mispronounce it, but the Nacotchtank peoples lived here on the eastern banks of the Anacostia River, and they had another town where Georgetown is today. They were here. When they left their villages, they moved to the Anacostine Island, which you know as the Teddy Roosevelt Island. Anacostia, the river, is only 8.4 miles long, and most of it is in the district. And as we look to grow our community and expand it, it's going to be in that area. So Anacostia, I think, is far more representative than any of the other options. So some substantive things. I know we're only supposed to talk about other articles, but I would like to point out real quick, Article 1, Section 2, we specifically say elections on a partisan basis. Ideally, I would say nonpartisan, but I know that that's not realistic. And so I urge us to consider as a model Article 2, Sections 5 and 6 of the California Constitution. I think that is an ideal model. Article 5 talks about a top 2 primary election. And Article 6 talks about a nonpartisan election for local offices, which, given the strong federal community that we have here, nonpartisan openings for them to run for local offices would be very helpful. And I'm out of time, but real quick, Article 3, Section 2, we need to define the Judicial Nomination Commission, and I urge us to look to the Arizona Constitution, Article 6, Section 41, for the definition and the makeup of what a nonpartisan Judicial Nomination Commission that includes non-attorneys, attorneys, and judges should consist of. And additionally, with respect to our current...
Mr. Solomons, you said you had 3 points.
Mm-hmm. Well, the third point's in 2 parts.
Well, there's a long list, or another 30 people. So.
I understand, and I will submit my comments in writing.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Mr. Is it Polvereski? Polvereski. Followed by David Schwartzman and then Catherine Beal.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So rather than just spend my time talking about the importance of statehood and the need for it, we all agree in this room we need it. It's been discussed for too many years already. So the outcome of what we're doing here today needs to be, how is this going to get through Congress? Because we know in the late 70s, when legislation was passed that would give us voting representation in Congress, we needed 3/4 of the states to ratify. We only had 18 states do that. So the question is now, how do we get the proposed Constitution through? And I understand that we don't want to have too many explicitly partisan statements, because when you say it will most likely give 2 Democratic senators and more Democratic congressmen in the House, that obviously is not appealing to Congress overall. And it's not going to be appealing right now or in 2017. So the question is, how do we do those things? One of the things that I think is very important that we explicitly say in the proposed Constitution is that we enumerate the rights guaranteed in the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, and potentially the 24th as well. But we need to say something about the right to vote explicitly, so we don't have a North Carolina-like situation here, potentially, in terms of voting restrictions and those type of things being a possibility when you all wonderful people are no longer in positions of authority. And the last point would be that we need national media attention. The reality is that residents in Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, they can all be saying the same thing. And some of them are. But the bottom line is this needs to happen. I don't want to come here in another 20 years and have a talk about, yeah, we need statehood. We've been talking about it since, home rule was in the early 70s, right, as we know. It's been over 40 years. That's long enough, as has been said many times. But the bottom line is this just needs to happen. Look, I'm a millennial. We do not have enough people that come out, okay? In the elections on Tuesday, we know in DC overall, we had, 27% of the eligible voters participate? So we need more participation overall, and that's, of course, a national thing. But the bottom line is, how did this happen? We all know it's important, we all want it, but it needs to happen. And I just urge everyone that is here, those that are not here, those that will be here in the future, we need to just keep the conversation going, and you need to have national media attention.
Thank you, Mr. Palversky. David Schwartzman, followed by Catherine Beal, followed by Shelley Tompkin.
Not that one. I'm David Schwartzman. I've lived in D.C. since 1976 when I joined the Statehood Party, and that was the forerunner of the D.C. Statehood Green Party. I'm also a professor emeritus at Howard University. I taught there for 39 years. So now, since I retired, I'm a full-time troublemaker. First, I applaud our statehood delegation for their tireless and underfunded lobbying for statehood from the local to the international scale, and likewise everyone here who's come out to testify in this, mark my words, so-called constitutional convention. And of course, I also thank our elected government for their commitment to the goal of statehood. And I'm going to just divert a little bit in history. We should all recognize the historic contribution of the D.C. Statehood Party to this struggle, starting with Julius Hobson, Hilda Mason, Joe Butler, Sam Smith, and others. And one of them is sitting right here, Phil Blair. We have never supported incrementalism, rather focused on the only solution for truly self-government and equality with citizens in the 50 states, D.C. statehood. And those are the nice words. Now I'm going to be a little more critical. I say so-called constitutional convention because this is not a democratic process. No one elected the new Columbia Statehood Commission to come up with a new constitution. This task is not in their job description. This process is a facade of democracy. I am not a delegate. If I were a delegate, I would be elected and I'd have a vote on the Constitution just like 1982, which was ratified by voters. What is being proposed here, keeping the structure as it is now, 13 council members become 13 legislators, is simply a way to ensure the federal city council will continue to set the agenda for our local elected government once we achieve statehood. An agenda which has resulted in record levels of income inequality, child poverty, and the vanishing of affordable housing for the majority of our residents. I'm almost done. Therefore, we should either use the already ratified 1982 Constitution with its prophetically progressive Bill of Rights, or convene an elected delegated convention after the November election, following the example and substance of the 1982 convention, and indeed the Tennessee Plan, which is referred to in your document. The Bill of Rights in 1982 included provisions for freedom from discrimination based on race, color, religion, creed, citizenship, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, poverty, parentage, or disability, and the right of employment as well as for those unable to work an income sufficient to meet basic human needs. And finally, all of this anticipated the fact that we became the first human rights city in the United States which actually embodies exactly the same rights. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartzman. Catherine Beal. And she will be followed by Shelley Tompkin and then Diane Richmond.
Hi, everybody. My name's Catherine Beal, and I'm a senior at Boston University. and I'm writing my undergraduate thesis on DC statehood. And I'm so excited that I see so many people here supporting the cause for DC statehood. But I think, and I'm just going to reiterate kind of what's already been said, but even though there's so many people here supporting now, we can get even more support. And I think that the best way to help get support is to tell your friends, your family members, people in the grocery store, anyone that you see, explain to them that it makes no sense that me, as a 7th generation Washingtonian, I don't have congressional representation, I don't get a say in how the government works, but if I move less than 10 miles from my home, if any of us move less than 10 miles from their home, they will be outside of the DC borders, they will be in Maryland or Virginia, and they become full constitutional citizens. And I think that's silly. I think that's idiotic that we aren't full residents of the United States because we live in the capital. We live in the center of democracy. We are the capital of the free world, but we ourselves don't enjoy the freedom that we try to spread through the whole world. And I don't know why. I don't know why DC residents don't have this, but I think we can all agree that it's unfair. That's why we're here. And we all can agree that it's undemocratic. I want to thank the commission and I want to thank everyone for their support with this. And I've only begun I'm in the infant stages of my research, so I don't have much more information or suggestions to provide, but I think the larger the voice is, the greater the odds are that we will succeed in this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Ms. Shelley Tompkin, followed by Diane Richmond, and then Royal Height.
My name is Shelley Tompkin. I appreciate this opportunity to testify on this very significant matter for the 670,000 residents of Washington, D.C. I am a native Washingtonian, a political scientist, and a longtime political and community activist in D.C. I first want to commend Mayor Bowser enthusiastically in the strongest of terms and the Commission for showing leadership on behalf of achieving the goal of D.C. becoming the 51st state. I also applaud her for recognizing that it is vital to take opportunities as they appear. And I do support this process in that it allows any citizen to provide input on the content of this draft Constitution through town meetings and this constitutional convention. And so as a citizen, I am now taking the advantage of that opportunity. And I'm only going to address one aspect of this draft Constitution, but one that I consider fundamental. And that is the issue of representation in the legislative body. I know that wasn't planned for this evening, but I wasn't able to appear on Monday. And I'd like to state unequivocally that the size of the newly constituted body should be enlarged significantly. If we wish to become a state, then we should look like a state in the design of the body that directly represents the people. Now, why do I say this, and why do I feel so strongly about this particular matter? First and most important, with a larger, either unicameral lawmaking entity or a bicameral body, more citizens will have a better opportunity to be heard and to have a seat at the decision-making table on matters that affect their well-being and quality of life. It stands to reason that if there are more representatives available to do a job, then residents will be able to enjoy closer attention from their representatives. The simple reality of having more hands on deck will allow for greater responsiveness to DC's residents' challenges. In the words of the National Conference of State Legislatures, with fewer constituents, a legislator is likely to have more face-to-face dealings with constituents. Again, in the words of the National Conference of State Legislature, quote, a larger number of members allows for more effective division of labor and specialization. Second, if we are serious about becoming a state, our legislature should look like a state legislature. No state, including the states with the smallest population centers, has a state legislature with a membership of less than 40 representatives. Most are much larger. The more significant equation, however, is population per legislator. It says stop, but I do want to make these points.
If you wind up quickly.
Okay. 3 states, Wyoming, Vermont, North Dakota, population per legislator ratios are respectively 4,000 to 1, 9,000 to 1, 7,000 to 1. With 13-person council or 13-person House of Delegates, the ratio is 80,000 constituents to 1. Third, real quickly, I don't think the legislature should be overly large either. A right-sized legislature can do a better and more efficient job in carrying out its legislative duties. And since I've run out of time, I'm going to be happy to submit some specific recommendations for this discussion. So in conclusion, I ask the Statehood Commission to take this matter seriously. It embodies an important element at the core of our struggle for genuine democracy, more direct representation in making decisions that affect the quality of our life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Diane Richmond. Is Diane Richmond here? Royal Height, is he here? Would you come forward? And Mr. Height will be followed by Matthew Levy and then Josh Birch.
To the distinguished panel, along with our Mayor, Muriel Bowser, I salute all of you for all of the hard work you guys have done to bring statehood to the forefront where it is right now. Let me introduce myself. My name is Royal Height. I'm representing 2 organizations, DC Legendary Musicians, which I think you say you get 5 minutes if you represent an organization. Also Stand Up, Free DC over here. And we are both organizations that are quite active in the DC community, representing musicians who put forth music for causes like this, and also a group that's actively involved and has been for more than 20 years, making a point to put statehood in the minds and the hearts of people around the world. As the music ambassador for Free DC, I want you to know that I'm not a neophyte in the music area. I am an active member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the R&B Hall of Fame, the Doo-Wop Hall of Fame, as well as the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. And I took it upon myself to present Washington, D.C. with a gift dedicated to the legacy of one of my family members, Dorothy Height. This is a song designed to unite the cry for statehood, not just in the D.C. proper, but around the world. So at this time, I would like to share with you the music that I put together, because music has power. It unites people. And again, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to introduce the DC theme song for statehood, and it's entitled Taxation Without Representation.
Mr. Height, I need you to be mindful of the time, please.
Well, I was told we had 5 minutes if you represented an organization. That's not true.
Well,
I'll do a verse of the song.
Thank you.
But we do have, we have it available, and it is on radio. Taxation without, all right. Some of you have heard it. Taxation without, and just pay attention to the lyrics, if you will. It can be right for everyone else, but wrong for you and me. Everywhere in the USA except Washington, D.C. We even go as far to fight for voting rights and democracy around the world, and overlook our nation's capital. More than a century we ain't been heard. There's something wrong with taxation without, it's wrong. Let me hear you say taxation without. How long? I'm going to end it right now, but the song is a very, very appropriate song, one that we plan on taking not only to the city, but around the world as the ambassador of music. That's our intent, and that's our contribution to end this wrong thing, taxation without representation, and statehood for Washington, D.C.
All right.
Thank you, Royal Heights. Matthew Levy, followed by Josh Birch. Is Mr. Levy here?
Oh, but Josh is here.
Josh Birch. And he will
Good
be
job.
followed by Michael Lee Matthew, and then Lakalia Dolman.
And Matt said he agreed with whatever I said. So
There you go.
Thank you guys for hosting again tonight. Specifically for the executive branch, in terms of recommended changes, we talk about the Attorney General, but it doesn't delineate any powers to our Attorney General in the Constitution, and the Constitution is supposed to articulate the powers that that office should have. So I think we really need to take time and address the powers of our newly elected Attorney General. Although this is in the legislative branch, I brought it up the other night. I think the line item veto needs to be taken out of the Constitution. I think if we want to deal with that legislatively once we're a state, that's fine. But I don't think it should be in our Constitution. I think the legislative review of contracts should be taken out. Again, I think that's something we should deal with after we're a state, but it shouldn't be in our Constitution. I would like to say I think the map that was presented the other night was really good. I agree with what other people said. We need a much bigger legislature, a much more representative legislature in terms of representing a fewer number of people, as opposed to 70,000 now, roughly. We need to have representatives of about 20 to 25,000. And then finally, I know people have brought up the name several times tonight. I'm just going to reiterate what I said the other night. As someone who was born and raised here and who's raising a family here, it would fill my heart with pride and emotion to be named after Frederick Douglass, a suffragist, a humanitarian, and abolitionist, as opposed to what our current state name is proposed to be. And I think we can do Douglass Commonwealth, and we keep the DC that we're so proud of, that we have everywhere. So I think Douglass Commonwealth is the way we should go. And with that, I'm going to finish under my time because I love all of you, and I love your families, and that's where we all want to be at some point tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Michael Lee Matthew, followed by Lakelia Dolman, followed by Beth Marcus.
I have to say, Chairman Mendelson, one of my favorites, brings joy to my heart. I have to say, Muriel Bowser for president, to lead this city, to lead this country, America's very best mayor. Once again, Muriel Bowser for president, to lead this city, to lead this country, America's very best mayor. To fix this city and to fix this country, we're here to lead, we're not here to follow. Once again, to fix this city, to fix this country, we're here to lead and we're here to follow. Healthiest city in America, the most peaceful city in America, the safest city in America, the city of love. The healthiest city in America, the most peaceful city in America, the safest city in America, the city of love. Let's make this happen. We can do this. Let's all work together. We are number one. Let's move forward together. No one left behind, reaching all the people, greatest city in America. Let's move forward together. No one left behind, reaching all the people, greatest city in America. Believing in the mayor, to support the mayor, we deserve the best, moving this city forward. Believing in the mayor, to support the mayor, we deserve the best, moving this city forward. Best student, most important, the public schools, best students in America, best teachers in America, best schools in America, the highest performing schools. This should be our goal. Best students in America, best teachers in America, best schools in America, the highest performing schools. The city of champions, we're here to win. Let's fight for statehood. Unprecedented, unmatched economic prosperity to the city, bringing unprecedented, unmatched economic prosperity to the city. Our wonderful Heavenly Father, number one, $4 trillion team, number two, let there be light, number three, and $4 billion plan. I pray that the president and the vice president, the 100 senators, and 435 representatives will cling to our Father's commandment, cling to our Father's covenant the same way we do the Constitution. And once again, Muriel Bowser for president, to lead this city, to lead this country, America's very best mayor, to fix this city, to fix this country. We're here to lead, we're not here to follow, and best students in America, best teachers in America, best schools in America, and the highest performing schools. And the Sabbath, the 25th Sabbath of the year has begun. The Shabbat has begun. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Lakelia Dolman, is she here?
There we go. All right.
Hello, my name is Lakelia Dolman. I am 6 years old, and I attended Friendship Chamberlain Elementary School. I shared my statehood pictures, flyers, and music with my school. They were very excited. They support DC statehood. What do you want, statehood?
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Dolman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Beth Marcus, and Beth Marcus will be followed by Kesh Littlewahedi, and then Matthew Fruman.
I think there has to be a W.C. Field quote or something about not following children. But here it goes anyway. Very brief. I'd like to suggest a change or a modification to the Constitution. We all agree that D.C. residents are disenfranchised by the federal government. As a very, very proud Democrat, I believe our closed primary system creates disenfranchisement of many D.C. residents, Republicans and independents. And there are many people who, for reasons of their jobs, such as journalists, who cannot register to vote as a Democrat or as one particular party. So I think we are disenfranchising our own citizens. I think that the Constitution, and I say this as a Democrat, I think that this Constitution should require open primaries. The U.S. Constitution in Article 1 is very specific that certain laws should have been passed when it was created by the Congress of the United States. So I see no reason why we can't be specific about this in the Constitution. I really think open primaries are essential, and maybe it would show to those who are on a different political perspective than mine that it might ameliorate some of the partisanship arguments. So I encourage you to consider open primaries. And I've got a minute, so I'm just going to say something about, I don't know how we get people throughout the country to be supportive of this. I'm a volunteer docent at the National Archives, and I was mentioning to the mayor that right now for the Amending America exhibit until 2017, there is an entire wall, I love it, it's a whole wall about how DC pays more in federal taxes than, they said, I think 17 states, 20 states, whatever it is, it's a lot. And how we have more people than two. This is an entire wall. And when I have the chance to take tourists in there, I make sure that they see this wall. And they're all, oh my, this is terrible. And I say, well, I'm a DC resident. And could you help us, please? Only you in your states can help us. And they all look like they support it and everything, I doubt any of them go back home and call their representative to do anything. So I don't know what we do, but that's the key. Somehow there has to be. And I encourage all of you to come to the archives and see that wall, because you'll be very proud to see that there is a wall making that statement. But the point is, where do we take it? So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcus. Kesh Little-Hedy, followed by Matt Fruman.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, fellow DC residents. My name is Kesh Little-Hedy, and I will be testifying on behalf of DC for Democracy. DC for Democracy commends the commission for bringing new momentum to the statehood movement. We support the concept of a November referendum that will allow DC voters to affirm our support for statehood and for the full rights of citizenship. We also welcome revisiting the state constitution. These are all positive elements that we fully support. We are not, however, in favor of including a vote on a new state constitution in November. Rather, we suggest that voters assent to a process for convening a constitutional convention with elected delegates that will have proper authority to create a new constitution. The reasons for our recommendation are as follows. The proposed Tennessee plan is not substantively different from the current New Columbia Admission Act. The obstacles in the current bill are not concerns about the '87 Constitution, but pure politics. A referendum that affirms DC voters' desire for statehood and authorizes a proper constitutional convention, together with a favorable outcome in the November elections, will provide sufficient momentum for statehood next year. And we agree that a new state constitution is needed. However, it is not necessary to finalize this constitution by November. We can mobilize support for statehood nationally and on Capitol Hill while we conduct a proper and legitimate constitutional convention. The current process for developing a new constitution does not pass muster. The authority for drafting and finalizing the constitution rests solely with the commission. This event tonight is a wonderful thing, but it is not a constitutional convention. And despite these pretty badges, we are not delegates with any real authority. Like Congresswoman Norton, we are non-voting delegates. A rushed and undemocratic process to draft a new constitution before November risks undermining support for statehood. It would be disastrous if the referendum fails to pass overwhelmingly. The inclusion of questions on the Constitution, boundaries, form of government risks raising concerns in the minds of the public. In our initial review of the draft Constitution, we are concerned by a number of provisions. I will not read them all now, but the most serious concerns are the size of the House of Delegates, the manner of filling vacancies for at-large members, and the constitutional amendment process. The new state constitution is a serious matter of great concern to the people and should be handled through a proper and legitimate constitutional convention before it is submitted to the voters for ratification. We urge the Commission to address these concerns by simplifying the November referendum to affirm DC voters' desire for statehood and authorize a proper constitutional convention. DC for Democracy members have worked diligently to promote statehood for the last 7 years as active members of the DC Statehood Coalition. We are wholeheartedly committed to achieving statehood. We offer these recommendations because we agree with the Commission's goal of building momentum for statehood this year and next, and wish to remove any obstacles to success in that effort. We look forward to working with the Commission towards our common purpose of advancing statehood in this critical period. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Little-Hedy. Matt Fruman, followed by Jabari Zakia, and then it looks like it says Caroline Selrick? Carolina Selrick. Mr. Fruman.
So first I want to thank Mayor Bowser who got this process going. It is a very promising, constructive, well-timed process, and hats off to you for getting it going. Also, I have to say this evening has been sensational, so thanks to the commission and thanks to the people who participated so far. The points made just by Keish, we need to get it right. And so whether it's stepping back or whether it's getting revisions that take into account the comments that you've received, it's critical that we get the template right here. I'm just going to make a few points. On the size of the legislature, I think you've heard it from a lot of different people, a lot of different reasons. 13 is way too small. 13, when we have a council of 13, sort of looks like a self-preservation kind of thing. I think we need a significantly larger legislature, one that can accommodate the kind of competition that Mr. Vredenberg and Mr. Raskin were talking about earlier. Second, on the powers of the State Board of Education, it gets a little technical, but the draft constitution says that the legislature can empower the state board, but only up into the level that the state board had power before the constitution was enacted. The effect of that is to make mayoral control, which is a policy choice, a matter for the constitution. People can debate it one way or another, but it shouldn't be in the Constitution. It's a little bit of an anomalous provision there, and it can easily be fixed in a revision process. Last, I'll speak to the name. I have to say, I've always liked the name New Columbia. I hadn't thought much about it, and I've always thought it had a nice ring to it. I hear all of the different concerns that people have raised, and it makes me think, how wedded am I to a name? And it's a little bit hard to be wedded to a name when we're also urging that the football team change its name, demanding that the football team change its name. So I hope that the commission will be receptive to thinking about different names that might better reflect the values of the people of our city. So with that, I think I have a minute. I'm going to stop in the spirit of Josh Birch and let people get back to their homes. But thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Furman. Is Sabari Zakia here? If you'd come forward, followed by Carolina. Again, I'm sorry. It's hard to read the writing here. Selrick. Followed by Cliff Smith, and then Lawrence Albert. Please proceed, Mr. Zakia.
Good evening. My name is Jabari Zakia. I was born and raised here and went through the then good public school system and graduating from McKinley Tech. I thereupon went to Cornell University receiving a BS in electrical engineering, then Georgia Tech, and got my master's in EE and worked 15 years at Goddard Space Flight Center after leaving Georgia Tech. I currently write software and teach and tutor mostly math. I'm testifying to provide tangible, specific suggestions I believe will make the process of creating a constitution more efficient and easier to manage, and will produce a more satisfying and acceptable result to a larger majority of the people. I'm going to be excerpting and summarizing parts of a paper I'm creating called Creating a Modern Constitution for the 51st State, which is available online. Creating a better and more inclusive process. 1, the process needs to take as much time as required and not be artificially rushed and time constrained. 2, there needs to be more money, effort, and time put into getting the word out to every citizen that this process is taking place. This should include creating a basic constitutional primer, comparing structures and provisions of the current state constitutions to educate people on the basic ideas, structures, and terminology involved in making a constitution to use as a baseline to start discussions from. 3, the people should be the ultimate determiners of the basic structures and provisions included in the Constitution, not lawyers, academics, and politicians. 4, the Commission should use a document version control system such as Git and an online document repository such as GitHub to maintain the drafts, allowing people public access to the most recent version and the means to download, modify, and submit updated versions for review, consideration by the public and the Commission. 5, the Commission should use online wikis and forums to encourage and facilitate public discussions on the issues. It should also conduct periodic and necessary public polls on the issues to determine the documents and document real-time public sentiment on the issues. Now I'll just have a list of short issues I think that need to be publicly evaluated and robustly discussed before they can even be considered in the Constitution. 1, should we have a state bank, such as North Dakota, the only state that has one? 2, should drug use be a right, as in Portugal, which legalized the personal use of all drugs? 3, should instant runoff voting be enshrined in the Constitution? 4, should elections be run on a nonpartisan basis, publicly funded? 5, should the right and ability of citizens to determine budgets, open budgeting, be provided? 6, should we abolish state income taxes like 9 other states? What form of taxations? A fair tax system? 7, what kind of constitutional amendment process should there be? 8, how many judiciary levels should there be? Their names, number of judges appointed or elected, term limits, age limit. 9, we should have a bicameral state legislature. Only Nebraska has a unicameral state legislature. 10, whose rights should be observed and protected? Should corporations and other non-human entities, pets, robots, avatars, what classes of natural humans deserve specific protection? In conclusion, I hope the Commission will formally take measures to evaluate and assess my recommendations and suggestions to take them to heart. We will likely get only one chance to ratify our state constitution. We have an historic opportunity to take the time to do the research and take from governments around the world the best ideas, practices, policies, and implementations of governments. We are not bound by or restricted to the past. We have centuries worth of knowledge of what does not work for most people, and thus what we shouldn't do. And now decades of emerging knowledge and research of better and best practices for achieving the best social, economic, environmental, and loads of other outcomes through the structure and operation of government. Creating a good constitution is hard and takes a lot of holistic thought, diverse inputs, and lots of time. Creating a bad constitution is much easier.
Mr. Zakia,
one sentence, I'm finished.
Your time is over.
My hope is we will take the time and put the research, resources, and outreach into creating a constitution that a century from now will stand the test of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolina Selnick. I think I've got the name right. Is she here? Cliff Smith. Is he here? And Mr. Smith will be followed by Lawrence Albert and then Jeffrey Nolan.
My name is Cliff Smith. I figured you all probably needed an old radical to talk to you. I wanted to thank whoever set up the robocalls. I got one from Mayor Bowser a few days ago. I hope this went out throughout the city. I would hope that in October there'll be a robocall to every one of the 670,000 people of DC to urge them to vote on this referendum in November. I understand the whole thing of the Constitution. I would love to have a radical Constitution. However, to me, the primary object is statehood, even given the non-democratic situation that Dave talked about and others have. Somebody mentioned we could have maybe another constitutional convention in 3 years after we get statehood. I think that'd be a good idea. I'm from Alaska originally. My mother got an award from the state of Alaska for helping bring in Alaska as a state. 140 years before that, my mother's family was involved in bringing Texas into the Union as a state. I believe that it's in my family heritage that I should be here today.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
I also think that, yes, it's important to reach out to the people of America about getting statehood. However, we have to show the energy in this city to show the rest of the country that we want statehood. For instance, I think Emancipation Day, which is great every April, I think it should be turned into not primarily commemorating what happened in 1862, but to commemorate what we're going to bring about. In other words, how can you say that it's great to have emancipation in a colony? I mean, this sort of doesn't make sense, does it? We will have true emancipation when we have statehood. I also think that maybe we should look beyond it. Yes, we may gain victory this year or next year, but we should still look that maybe we won't, and that we should continue in energy. For instance, maybe have a referendum for statehood every 2 years, just to show that the people of America, that we do want it, we continue to want it, we always want it. We can't assume that the people of DC want to. The people of America have to see that we all want it. I think this energy should be generated. Ideal constitutions, there's one in Mexico from the Revolution of 1910. I think it had 100,000 words. A lot of people say it is for the purpose of what Mexico may become. Maybe that's the constitution we will develop, but maybe not now, maybe after we get statehood. There's the South African constitution, which is, many people think is the most progressive in the world. We should maybe look at that as an example. But again, I assume that we have such a progressive district, we always have had for many, many decades now. I assume that even if we have a conservative constitution going forward in November, that we are such a city that we will make it progressive as time goes on with amendments, et cetera. I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've had $15 minimum wage passed in the city council. To me, we should be very proud of that. But that's the kind of city we are, and we've been doing that kind of stuff for LGBT and for African Americans and for all people who live in this city, and I have no doubt that we will continue to do that. And I think the first goal is to get statehood. After that, we can open the doors to everything else that we want. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, as a state song, I'll only recommend that the state song after we get statehood will be the Internationale.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Lawrence Albert, followed by Jeffrey Nolan.
Good evening. My name is Lawrence Albert, members of the Statehood Commission. Thank you for this evening. I've lived in our future state for 36 years, and the future county of Cleveland Park for 36 years. If the proposed New Columbia Constitution is passed and we become a state, a long-held dream of mine will come true. I do have one suggestion for a simple amendment that would have a significant and positive impact on the new state government. I propose that the state elections be nonpartisan elections, not partisan as they currently are proposed to be in the Constitution. Partisan state elections will continue to prevent all approximately 200,000 federal employees and members of the military in the new state from being candidates for state office, just as the DC partisan elections have prevented them in the district for decades. A nonpartisan election will allow all the federal employees to consider running and to run as candidates for state offices, just as nonpartisan elections around the nation already do for those jurisdictions. College Park, Maryland is one of several nearby examples. College Park also has a small council or legislature, just as New Columbia has proposed in its constitution. We have long suffered from corruption and similar issues by candidates and office holders in the District of Columbia. Increasing the pool of potential candidates to include the wider range of experience and backgrounds that federal employees represent for the state would instantly improve the selection of quality candidates for all the new state voters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Jeffrey Nolan, is he here? I don't see him here. Niece Jenkins, followed by Bonnie Loper. Niece Jenkins, followed by Bonnie Loper, and then Lee Aiken.
Thank you so much again for organizing this. I really think this is extraordinary. I got involved in the statehood movement in 1997, starting Stand Up for Democracy in DC Coalition, which came about because the Congress of the United States of America took all powers from the local government except for parks and recreation. I am a native Washingtonian. I went to local DC public schools. I was shocked. I had no idea that we were such political slaves in the nation's capital. When the parks and recreation was the only thing that we controlled, we went down to the White House, which had at that time a Democratic president. We got on the White House fence and we were arrested, and we continued to do civil disobedience, to speak out, to say that statehood from the very beginning was the only thing that would protect us as full American citizens. I want to thank the commission, the mayor, our 3 United States senators, and our United States representatives. They are not shadows. I'm looking at them right now. And the chair of the council. I have submitted, on behalf of Stand Up for Democracy in DC, which is known as Free DC, our comments. We do have a lot of comments about the Constitution. And I want everybody here to be aware that this is a constitutional convention. I want you to go to statehood.dc.gov, read that Constitution. If you have any comments about it, go online and submit it. This is your right. You were given this paper as a delegate. You may not have a vote, which did disturb me. I must be honest about that. The fact that I'm a delegate with no vote does remind me, as Kesh said, of our delegate who is called by courtesy Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. I would advise that if people during this time period do not have time to review the Constitution, that be taken off of the referendum. Give people time to give some type of consideration for what they truly want to be in the future state of the District of Columbia, which I love the name, Banneker Commonwealth. I want all of our comments to be considered by the commission, who is going to make the final determination. I want the people of DC to know that you have the power to rise up against the United States Congress. I am an African American woman. I'm a black woman. And I know that my ancestors rose up and got us free. We're going to have to be responsible for our own freedom. And the people of DC are going to free ourselves.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Bonnie Loper, is she here? Lee Aiken. Ms. Aiken will be followed by Irene Jolson, and then Andrew Hainsworth.
Don't raise it. Just walk. First of all, I would like to thank the people up there and all their staff who have worked so hard to get this issue out before the people. I am not necessarily happy with everything they're getting out there, but I'm glad that the process is occurring. I came to Washington, D.C. the day after Kennedy was elected. My future husband had come here a few months earlier. My husband was a veteran. He's died. He never has been able to vote since he came there, and he never will. My 2 sons went here to Wilson High School. My oldest son did 3 years of ROTC. He entered the military. He is still in there. He's in Special Forces. He fought in Gulf War I. He has had 2 tours in Afghanistan, and thank goodness he has not died, because he would never have been able to vote either. And I hope that he will not die before any of us are able to vote. And we need to honor, I think it's 6,000 people from DC who have died over the years in the military and never been able to vote. And this is absolutely criminal. Talk about abuses. Another issue that I'm very concerned about is the fact that the new Constitution only says we're going to have 13 representatives. I think from what I've seen at all the meetings I've been, the people in general do not want 13. They want to go back to the 40 or a similar number that was in the original voted on Constitution of 1982. I think any effort to put this language in a constitution that people have to vote for in November could lead to the failure of this effort to get a positive vote on statehood. And we need to make sure that whatever the vote is in November, and there will be apparently council deliberations on this as well, we do not have that language in there. We need a constitution that gives balance to the executive, to the legislature, and to the judiciary, maintaining an independent attorney general and making sure that the mayor does not have a great deal more power than any of the other bodies. And this we have to continue to work for. I like the name of Douglas Commonwealth. There are 4 states that are commonwealths, including Virginia. So that could be a very good decision. And we were supposed to be talking about funding, so I would like to say one thing with regard to borrowing and the 17% limit, and that is that it should include a special mechanism for funding environmental things through the property tax mechanism or the income tax mechanism so that we can move forward on a green city.
Thank you, Ms. Aikman. Irene Gilson, if you'd come forward, and Ms. Gilson will be followed by Andrew Hainsworth and then Antonio Garcia.
Good evening. Thank you so very much. It is now 10 of 10, so I'll try to speak in less than a minute. I'm a native Washingtonian, born and raised at 17th and T Street Northwest, so I've had the extraordinary pleasure of seeing Washington change and grow and develop, and have also been involved in statehood for quite some time. And thank you so much to those of you who mentioned people who have gone in the past, who are no longer with us, and thanks to you for continuing the process. I'm going to submit written testimony. I would like to make 2 quick suggestions. I love the idea of engaging universities. If you count broadly the universities in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, there are 9, and engaging all of those students and parents and faculty in the process of getting the word out across the country is a wonderful idea, and I think we should collaborate. All of us should form a coalition of those universities and engage the students who are here this evening and beyond, and there are those of us who would be happy to do that. But that's for engagement of outside of Washington, D.C. Something that's a bit disturbing to me, as someone else mentioned, was that there are not many millennials here, and engaging just college students in the process leaves out an extraordinarily large number of millennials in Washington, D.C. And we need to involve them in the process, the deliberation process, and encourage them to participate in the voting process. And those are youth in Washington, D.C. who are not in beyond secondary education, who may have dropped out of schools, and who need to be nonetheless involved in the process. And I would strongly suggest that we do that. If there are those in countries around the world who are involving youth in democracy building and peace building, we can certainly do it in the District of Columbia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gilson. Andrew Hainsworth, and he will be followed by Antonio Garcia and then Daniel Lewis.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Hainsworth, and I would like to thank the mayor and the commission for this convention. I was born in 1992 in Ward 7 of Washington, D.C. I am a graduate of the George Washington University, and always wanted statehood. I know that we need statehood, and I'm definitely for changing the name and unbounding it from Christopher Columbus' legacy at all, and it should definitely either with Frederick Douglass or the people of the Anacostia. More specifically, when you get to the point of, Article 2 of the proposed Constitution, I believe that we should have a lieutenant governor that could possibly replace the governor instead of the Speaker of the House. And to those that fear that not enough millennials are here, I want you to know that we are listening, we are watching, and even if this doesn't pass, even though I hope it does, and I'm working to make sure that we have something in 2017 for statehood, that things will change, and no matter what, DC will have statehood.
Thank you, Mr. Hainsworth. Antonio Garcia, followed by Daniel Lewis, and then FDR Foote.
Good evening. My name is Antonio Garcia. Thank you very much, Mayor, for inviting us here. I ran last night here, thinking that it was yesterday, this meeting, this convention. So I went home, I came back today.
Okay, thank you.
But I am a disabled veteran, Latino, and a psychiatric social worker, and but not practicing. What I'm here for is just to tell, we're here making history, actually, by telling Congress enough is enough of taxation without representation, and by becoming the 51st state, we are going to move forward. And we're going to provide, by doing that, the citizens of our city the necessary tools to move forward, to grow, to develop, and I would tell Congress again, stop pimping us, because that's what it is. When we give $2 billion to Congress and they give us a penny, that's pimping. So we said enough is enough. And we don't have no more time, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Daniel Lewis.
A recommendation, I'm sorry. I think that instead of, it would be better to have municipalities and 2 representatives per ward. And I'm from Ward 2.
Okay, all right.
Thank you again. Daniel Lewis, FDR Foote. I'm sorry, you are?
Daniel Lewis.
Daniel Lewis.
Excellent.
Go? Yeah. My name is Daniel, and I'm sorry for y'all, but I don't have a constitutional recommendation. I'm 19. I haven't really gone that into it, to be honest. But I am pretty much millennial, and I can say from my perspective, I didn't really care about this issue until last year, until really the John Oliver video came out. And I don't want to over focus on that as the only thing we can use to push for this issue, but it has to really be known that a lot of people in the district themselves don't really care. Most of us have been in here stuck in the echo chamber for about 3 hours, and it's great because for me, I see why I should fight for it. I see the people coming up here and telling the stories that need to be told, and that really I think should be told in front of Congress. A lot of these stories of veterans and of people that have experienced statelessness and know what it's like. But I do want to actually make this brief and just make it known to y'all that it's really, as it's set up now, everyone in this room and really the majority of DC, I imagine, is going to vote for this. I don't think we're going to have many residents who look at that paper and say, I don't want that, no matter how educated they are on the issue. And so it's up to you guys, the council people, the mayor, and the commission to work on perfecting this Constitution, work on taking what has been said and making it so that what will be voted on, what will be voted yes on, really, is something that we all want. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. FDR Foote, is he here? Peter Espenschied, if you'd come forward, followed by Ann Lyko, and then Thomas Hood.
I'm Peter Espenschied. I'm a resident of Ward 7. I've lived in the District of Columbia for decades rather than years. I've favored DC statehood ever since I was aware of the issue, which is a long time ago. However, I am very concerned about the way in which this operation is going. I think the Statehood Commission has made an enormous mega error in attaching the process of a constitution, a so-called constitutional convention, to the process of getting statehood. This is like dragging a heavy stone behind you as you run up a hill. It's entirely unnecessary. The so-called Tennessee Plan is not embodied in the Constitution nor in law. It's only a 250-year-old custom, a thing that was done. It certainly doesn't form a pattern that we need to follow or that we should follow. I agree with what DC for Democracy has said, that we should be pursuing statehood as such. The Constitution should be arrived at by a genuine constitutional convention called within the new state after we become a state. And I also agree with the observation of Lee Aiken that putting this all together, putting this Constitution together with the proposal for statehood on the ballot may sink the referendum. I think that is actually a substantial likelihood. It's totally unnecessary, and it's making the statehood process, frankly, into a farce. I hope that we can do better. I hope that the so-called New Columbia Statehood Commission, which raises the issue of the name again, will rethink this matter and drop the whole process of attaching a constitution, get us to statehood as such, and also seriously rethink the name. New Columbia was also dragging a lot of bad history into the name of the state. I don't think it's a very good idea to name it for a person. I think that Anacostia and Potomac are two good candidates. There are probably others, but a name that follows the original inhabitants of where we live is probably a good idea. I think that we do have to have a name to go with the proposed legislation. So that matter does need to get attention, but the Constitution doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Espenschied. Ann Lyko, followed by Thomas Hood, and then Guy Durant.
I think I'm going to turn this way because you are the ones who have the vote. We don't. I'm Ann Lyko. I've been working for statehood since 1970 when I first learned how we could do it from Sam Smith, who wrote The Case for Statehood almost 46 years ago in June of 1970. I would like to urge the commission, and in particularly the chairman and the mayor, to fund this effort. And that means fund our statehood delegation. That means salaries for them, which is if you're thinking Tennessee plans, and it means to fund the education effort. We all have been doing all the things you've been talking about for decades, but with pennies. It is time that our government that represents us, if you really care about statehood, puts our money where our mouth is. I also want to just go through some comments. I've been getting a lot of calls from people all over the city concerned about the Constitution and what's going on. And I would like to say that I concur with everything that DC for Democracy stated, that the referendum should be a referendum affirming our desire for statehood. And if we want to add anything to it, it would be an election of delegates for a statehood constitutional convention to be held in early 2017. It is very clear from all the comments you've received, and I read the log that you've done, and there are a lot of really sensitive and sensible comments on what we should do, and there are issues out there that need to be debated by the people, and the people need to have a vote on the issues in the process of putting together a constitution or a revised constitution, and that's what we need to be doing, plus educating both all the new people in the District of Columbia and the people around the nation about what our issues are. The paper I just handed you has some of the issues that I had and the issues that were supposed to be discussed today. Things like, I agree there shouldn't be a line item veto. I had a question why we have in the Constitution that there has to be an administrator or chief operating officer, why that isn't just an issue for the governor, is how the governor wants to organize their administration. That it should explicitly make the governor the commander of our National Guard. The president is now, and that will take a legislative change. Missing from the Constitution are all the independent agencies and how they're to be treated. And those are things like the Board of Elections and Ethics, the Zoning Commission, the Public Service Commission, the Office of People's Counsel. They tend to be your regulatory agencies who should not be in the executive branch under the governor. Same way that the Constitution tries to put the elected Attorney General in the executive branch. In fact, I looked up the legislation and the initiative that created the office, and it was to give the Attorney General independence that was going to be elected, and it should not, the Attorney General is not in the executive branch. The same thing I would say for the State Board of Education should be seen as an independent agency outside of the executive branch, and I suggest that the size of it be enlarged and their powers enumerated in the Constitution.
Your time's expired. You're about a minute over.
Do I get 3 or 5? I'm representing an organization. DC Statehood, yes, we can.
3 minutes, but you spoke the other night as well.
All you're saying by doing this is not a real convention, that we are not real delegates, and that our views really don't matter when you don't want substantive comments to be presented and you're limiting people to 3 minutes on a constitution that you're rushing through and asking us to vote on. And I agree with the earlier comment that you're probably pushing it to be defeated if that is the way you're going to handle this. Because what I actually am one of the people who read the Constitution and read all the sections and actually have reasonable comments about the substance of the provisions and the pieces that are missing. And I was almost finished, too.
Well, it's helpful that you have a written statement. There are about 15 more, maybe 10 more people after you. It's now 5 after 10 in the evening. So, and I think you've spoken for about 5 minutes now. Thank you.
Well, it just shows what the Constitution Convention is not. Thank you.
Oh, come on. So ridiculous.
Thank you, Ms. Lyko. Thomas Hood, followed by Guy Durant.
Good evening.
Mr. Hood here?
That's me.
Excellent.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Hood, born and raised here in the District of Columbia. For the first 3 years of my life, it was spent in the hospital for sick children on Bunker Hill Road, Northeast. I was born with water on the brain, hydrocephalus. First 3 years of my life was spent at the hospital for sick children. And yes, this should be a state. All major decisions are made here in Washington, D.C. All other cities and states must follow. I've been here all my life. Just got housing through Community Connections. Been with them for a year now. I'm not pleased with where I'm at, but I'm still in that housing until I move to my first floor apartment. However, Congress has did one thing for this city. That was when they closed Lorton. I've seen so much bloodshed in my lifetime. That's the only thing that they ever did was when they closed Lorton down. Now what they need to do is give us representation in Congress. We need that more than anything in this world. And I ask you to please give that to us as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Guy Durant, and he will be followed by Rick Rybeck, who will be followed by, I believe it's Haran Najid.
Thank you. I'm going to try to face both directions. So I'm going to go this way because I want to talk to you and I want to talk to the audience. Two-faced, there you go. Two faces because, we got to look at all sides. I'm going to talk about duality and two sides. My name is Guy Duran. I live in Ward 5 and bring greetings also from Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, where Reverend Graylin Hagler is our senior minister, and in our church they teach us to speak truth to power. We spoke on Article 1 on Monday, and today is about Article 2, the executive branch, and Article 4, the budget and financial management, and Article 5 about borrowing. One of the things I just want to say off the bat is that when Omarosa came here, I thought that was very important. She represents Donald Trump. I mean, a lot of us are Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. But just the fact that it's not political anymore, it's moral. This is a civil rights movement. We have allies across the spectrum. We need allies from all sectors and all spectrums. So, the nonpartisanship ideas that have come out is very important because we need Republicans and Democrats. The rest of the country doesn't want to just see, oh, this is a Democrat issue. Oh, this is a partisan issue. Oh, this is political. No, it's a civil rights issue. This is like free Mandela. This is civil rights. This should be going to the UN, the United Nations. When the other lady was talking about this is a civil rights issue and there's treaties, that's a lawsuit. When you're talking about suing Congress, what about for violation of a treaty? Because if we're covered under a treaty that we're supposed to be given the civil rights of other countries, for instance, a lot of us, we have Catholic University here. We have a large presence of Catholics. The Pope is, also a governor of a city-state there in Vatican City. What about getting all the national governors together and getting them to make an endorsement saying that, our mayor should be, I don't know if you sit on the National Governors Association or not, but you could be, at least there waiting. In waiting, they could get behind you and all the Democratic governors could say, you're going to sit on the National Governors Association. All the mayors of the city across, they could write resolutions to their congressmen. So it could be a movement. So let's, not think in terms of political, let's think in terms of movement. And so the college students, yeah, that's very important because like we said, we want all the grassroots out there to come along. And I was also thinking when we come to contracting in the budget, we give preference to veterans, we give preference to DC natives. I'm a DC native. What if we told our contractors, you'll get a preference based on the percentage of giving that you give to the DC statehood movement. So if you give 1% to the DC statehood commission for advertising, you'll get a 1% preference on your bidding of contracts. So you have to look at those kind of innovative ways to fund this because you may be limited in how you can fund, but what if you gave preference in contracting to those who support statehood? What if we asked all our nonprofits, AARP, AAA, National Teachers Association, our veterans groups, our sports teams, when we're signing other deals, we just had Pepco and Exelon, which was very controversial, but, did we ask them to support statehood? I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I haven't seen them send out anything saying they support statehood. The Dalai Lama, we have a lot of diplomats here. Are we asking our diplomatic community to support statehood?
Mr. Durant?
Okay, I understand. I'm out of time. But the point is that it has to be a movement, and the Bible says that righteousness exalts a nation, sin is a reproach to any people, and we have to get rid of the original sin of colonialism here in D.C. by asking everybody to see this as a civil rights movement. And where's Jesse Jackson on this?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durant. Rick Rybeck, followed by Haran Najid, and then John Pincus.
Thank you. My name is Rick Rybeck. I'm the director of Just Economics, a consulting firm that assists communities in harmonizing economic incentives with public policy objectives. I got my start working for Hilda Mason, as you know, on the City Council, and have worked in the DC government for a number of years before starting this firm. I want to thank all of you on the dais. I want to thank all the volunteers and contractors who made tonight possible. I want to thank everybody in the audience and those who are taking time at home to watch this on TV. It's an important issue. We're here tonight to talk about, among other things, the budget issues. And Article 4 has Section 5, which requires a balanced budget. And having a balanced budget is important. But how a community raises revenue is just as important as how much revenue is raised. And just to put it in simple terms, most of us pay for water and sewer with a per gallon fee. The more we drink, the more we flush, the more we pay. It's easy to understand, it seems fair, and there's some interesting consequences because when I have a leaky faucet, I don't just see water going down the drain, I see my money going down the drain, and that encourages me to fix my leaky faucet. So there's some commendable things about user fees. Now, we could pay for water and sewer with a sales tax. I mean, sales taxes raise lots of money, and we could do that. But if we paid for water and sewer with a sales tax, would it have any relationship to how much water we're consuming, how many toilets we're flushing? It wouldn't. And if I had a leaky faucet, would I be inspired to fix it? Would I go out and buy a pair of shoes that I didn't want just to compensate the Water and Sewer Authority for the water I was wasting? Probably not. So I think it's important that there's something in here that talks about how we raise money as much as how much we raise. And I've talked about user fees, but there's more to it than that. So, for example, a vacant lot, people who own vacant lots. They're not drinking any water, they're not flushing any toilets. Should they pay anything to the Water and Sewer Authority? Well, as it turns out, the value of the vacant lot is higher because there are water and sewer pipes at the edge, much higher than it would be if they weren't there. So the value of the vacant lot is related to the value of the public goods and services that are provided. So in addition to user fees, there need to be access fees or value capture. And if we can get the right balance between access fees and user fees, we can make our city work better in terms of creating incentives for employment, affordable housing, and environmental enhancement. I have some details here, but in the interest of time, I'll submit those in writing. But thank you very much. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rybeck. Haran Najid. John Pincus, Laura Fuchs, Ann Wilcox.
There we go.
While you're coming up, let me just repeat those names. Haran Najid, John Pincus, Laura Fuchs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Madam Mayor, and thank you all for staying out this evening. I appreciate the chance to just stand up, speak during the convention. I did speak at one of the town halls last week and gave a few substantive comments about the Constitution, in particular, adding to the preamble the possibility of a right to privacy, which might want to include in the preamble, and also repeating some of the comments that have already been made about the size of the legislature and so forth, so I won't repeat that. I did want to stand, though, as a member of the Statehood Green Party and review a little bit of that history briefly. The Statehood Party was founded in the early 70s by Julius Hobson, Hilda Mason, and others, Josephine Butler, and others who have stood consistently over this since the early 70s for full statehood and political rights for the district residents. However, many have joined that fight over the years. Walter Fauntleroy, our delegate, had a constitutional amendment in the late 70s, which he tried to get through the requisite number of states. Unfortunately, they fell short, but that would have provided, of course, 2 senators and a voting representative. We also, Reverend Jesse Jackson was mentioned just a few minutes by one of the speakers. In the 90s, he was the first shadow senator, which was part of the statehood delegation, the shadow delegation that we still have today. And he tried very hard to get the idea of statehood before the Rainbow Coalition through groups like National Organization for Women, other national membership organizations, to try to do a national campaign around statehood. Unfortunately, he didn't get us over the finish line either, but hopefully with all the efforts that are coming together around the mayor's proposal, we can move the ball forward. I also want to mention Kim Perry and the DC Vote, which the Statehood Party has sometimes differed with DC Vote because they just promoted voting rights, but I think in recent years, DC Vote was also very strongly in support of statehood. So again, I would also call for, as Jamie Raskin mentioned earlier, getting out in the streets, maybe have a Moral Monday, regular march every week, every month, something that we can all join together, which will get some more media and more attention to the issue. So thank you again, Madam Mayor, for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilcox. That concludes all those who signed up. Now we will be reconvening tomorrow. What's that? And what did you sign up on? I hear a voice and I don't see a person.
One straight back and one right here.
Why don't you come forward and identify yourself?
I think that's Martin.
Thank you to the panel and also to those of you who have survived the evening. My name is Leanne Nurse. I'm a resident of the district since 1998. I'm active in my faith community, the Buddhist SGI USA. We're at 34th in Massachusetts, and we've welcomed many of you to our interfaith activities. I work at the Environmental Protection Agency, and I've been employed there since 1989. My educational background is in conflict engagement and analysis, and therefore I'm speaking to a different section of the Constitution. And I understand what people are saying about delaying the Constitution, but I have a sense that there may be some progress. The Article 7, Section 1 on openness and transparency talks about a sort of vague principles on both openness and transparency, and I think we're experiencing some of that tension tonight. But Dr. Cornelius Kerwin, who's the president of American University, has talked about participation and accountability as two of the pillars of effective governance. So at whatever point the Constitution comes to life, whether this year or next, I'm going to encourage the panel to consider incorporating core values of public participation. In my service in this area, I've served on the boards of the International Association for Public Participation and also the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation. So for the last 40 years, I've been trying to create effective participation for both government and non-governmental organizations. I've designed the EPA policy on public participation and training for both EPA and other federal agencies and for nonprofit organizations. So among the things that the IAP2 core values on public participation say is that public participation is based on the belief that those who are affected by a decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. And public participation includes the promise that the public's contribution will actually influence the decision. So I'll be submitting additional references online, and what I suggest that the panel consider is a document which we worked with the American Bar Association and several other organizations called Making Participation Legal. So rather than torture yourselves about how to do it, it's all written in here. It's written by experts, both lawyers and non-lawyers, and it will help guide the new state in whichever form or whatever name we call it to actually create a situation in which all the members of the community feel that they have a voice and that they're welcome in this conversation. So imagine if you get up one morning and your partner has spent all of the money in your joint bank account without telling you. You didn't have any participation. So we want in our new state a condition whereby those of us who live here can actually participate in the decision making and therefore make it common practice and not just common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nurse. Martin Moulton.
Thank you. Good evening, Statehood commissioners and neighbors. My name is Martin Moulton, and I was also arrested alongside Mayor Bowser and many others in this crucial cause to liberate D.C. If we are to win this battle, we will only do it by effectively bridging entrenched divisions. Although I lost my bid for U.S. Rep to my honorable friend, Mr. Garcia, in 2014, I was nonetheless the top libertarian vote getter in the district, with the support of many Democrats, Republicans, fellow cyclists, and my brothers and sisters in the LGBT community. I've used that fact to successfully advocate to liberate D.C. among fellow libertarians and conservatives, including some new friends, top scholars at the conservative Mises Institute. I agree with my brilliant brother, Josh Birch, that Douglas Commonwealth should be considered as the new state name. When I mentioned the hypocrisy of our government fighting numerous wars in foreign countries to push U.S. democracy on those who don't want it at the point of a gun, while denying it to U.S. citizens in the district who repeatedly, eagerly advocate for it, I received loud applause from a room full of conservatives. A few months ago, when I personally spoke with Libertarian nominee for president, Governor Gary Johnson, he reiterated his support for D.C. statehood, which he also supported in his 2012 presidential bid. If he polls high enough, and Democrats and Republicans don't rig the system to silence minority and third parties, and permit him to participate in the national debates, I'm certain Governor Johnson will make D.C. statehood a part of any national discussion on stage when the cameras are rolling, among many other issues that have been ignored by the establishment candidates. D.C. statehood is not just a liberal issue. It is essentially a small government, libertarian, and conservative cause. Libertarians want to keep the federal government out of local government policies and out of meddling in our private lives. As a small government advocate, I think the size of the new elected state body should be kept small and restricted by term limits. Libertarians are also fiercely upset that our Democrat president, in the name of democracy, uses our tax dollars to massacre thousands of innocent peoples overseas who are no threat to us, while enriching those in the military, gun, and weapons industries. And as Delegate Norton recently confirmed, Mr. Obama has on numerous occasions used his weekly address to advocate for illegal and unconstitutional wars in other nations, while never once using his address to educate and inform voters across the nation about the injustices and immorality of denying the citizens who are his immediate neighbors full democracy and equality with our friends and families in the 50 states. I urge my Democrat friends and neighbors not to think myopically. The nation has not elected a new president who advocates for war in several decades. So you should plan accordingly and not be blindsided, as so many Washington insiders have been in the past year. If voters outside the Beltway elect a candidate advocating for peace and spending our tax dollars and focusing on the needs of American citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Moulton. Mr. Moulton was the 45th witness to speak tonight. I want to thank everybody for attending tonight and all those who spoke for taking the time and speaking out. We will have the third session tomorrow morning starting at 9 o'clock in this room. We'll see some of you again maybe, and I hope some new voices as well. To speak, no. So again, I want to thank everybody.
Suggestion on how to disseminate the information.
Well, how about if you talk with us
Okay.
after? You had your chance, sir.
Hold on, sir.
You already spoke.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
But you can speak to one of us afterwards. And now the time is about 10:30, and so we will adjourn this meeting and reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
We now return to our previously scheduled program, already in progress.